Is it possible to beat ARK without breaking any of the 10 commandments? Probably not, but I'm gonna do it anyways. With absolutely no killing allowed, no stealing, no false gods, and most importantly, no adultery. Stop this instant, young man. Every commandment adds a brand new rule to ARK, making the game increasingly more difficult. And in this video, I'm going to ethically take down the Overseer and all 3 of his false idols, Mama Brood, Papapithecus, and Doug, all before day 100, right after I make my character.
Are you the one I've been waiting for?
No, not really. On day 1, I spawned on the South Zone beach, and I spent my morning doing some light cardio and some Bible study. Because with commandment number 6 being thou shalt not kill, I had to figure out how to get resources without committing murder. Hello, sir. And since everybody else in this challenge is not following the 10 commandments, well, this might be one of the hardest challenges I've attempted yet, and you'll see the other rules later as we reveal them throughout the video. But first, it was time to get some resources. So after grabbing some early 2000s rock, defending myself from this tree, and attending a college seminar on how to not be naked, I had to come up with a plan that didn't violate any of the 10 commandments. And first of all, I can't tame anything that I would have to knock out like these dodos, because that would require me to either punch them in the face or shoot them in the face with a tranquilizer. And even though physical violence doesn't necessarily mean killing something and breaking the 6th commandment, well, I'd say that physical violence is not very godly. So for this challenge, I'm not gonna hit, shoot, or cause any damage to anything throughout the entire video. And I think to get a start, I'm gonna need to find a passive tame. So after I decided to take up gardening as a hobby, I made some cloth armor, a pickaxe, and I made a hatchet. And everything to this point was going pretty well. Minus the degenerate over there committing some underwater atrocities. That brother just failed no murder November. But I tried to ignore that, and I continued along the beach while pondering on what I should actually do. I can't even tame a pteranodon, bro. Nothing on the entire South Beach was a passive tame. I couldn't even find a moss chops. But just when I was about to leave and spawn somewhere else, this happened. Oh, hello, sir. So I pressed the Y button on my controller about 300 times, farming enough berries to become vegan for the next 4 years. Hey, how's it going, dude? Placed some of the purple ones into the last slot of my hotbar, and tried to feed a mythical beast. But apparently, you have to be level 10. And I am inferior. The best way for me to level up in this game would be to decapitate this peasant here for XP. Oh, don't worry, buddy, I'm a changed man. And the second best way to level up on this game is to craft things, which is what we're gonna do. So, as the sun set on day 1, I learned some things inside my brain and prepared myself for the grind.
I do it again.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my humble abode. But also, I was level 12, meaning I could finally tame the unicorn. Well, if I could find him. Where is this dude? I spent a few minutes looking for this man with no success, but I did find this level 5 moss chops. And I don't know why everything is such a low level right now, but he wants tento berries, which is super easy. So I gently placed a single tento berry into his esophagus. He enjoyed it very much. And that was the story of how I became friends with El Chapo. But the story didn't last very long, because El Chapo was absolutely horrendous at walking, because the brother ran out of stamina before I even made it outside my front yard. But it was all good, because 3 seconds later, I found something much, much better. Oh, there he is. And with the berries in my hotbar, I snuck up and began the tame. And if you've never tamed these guys before, it's pretty easy. You just ride on their back, wait until they get angry and try to kick you off, and then you shove some berries down their trachea. Good times. And it does take a while, but about 15 minutes and 20 more angry berries later, Mr. Unicorn was tamed. Ow, get away from me, bro. I decided to name him Marty after that dude from Madagascar. And now that I'm writing the script, I realized that Marty's actually a zebra. Well, that's awkward. But anyways, with Marty by my side, it was time to leave the beach. So I set out for a challenge that would soon be more difficult than I could have ever imagined. ARK is probably one of the buggiest games I've ever played, and I love it. But instead of playing a buggy game, what if I told you that you could create one? Welcome to Boot.dev, where learning to code feels like an RPG video game. I just spent the past 2 hours learning Python, gaining XP, completing quests, and doing coding boss fight, which definitely beats the Python class that I took in college where they made me code the interface of an ATM machine. But the best part is that I'm learning a highly valuable skill in the process, because Boot.dev focuses on back-end developing, and in 2024, the median salary for back-end developers was over $100,000, and they typically get to work from home. That means extra free time to tame some more Gigantopithecus. And Python is what I was doing, and it's great for beginners, but there's also courses on many other languages like SQL, Go, TypeScript, and more. And if you ever get stuck, there's this AI coding wizard guy named Boots who will help you out to debug your code without directly giving you the answer. So if you want to try it out, a demo of the first few interactive lessons and reading and watching all content is completely free. And if you go to Boot.dev and use the code Juztify, you'll get 25% off your first year on the annual plan, and there's a 30-day no questions asked refund policy if you change your mind. So go to Boot.dev today to check it out. I'll drop a link in the description below, and there's a QR code on screen. And thank you to Boot.dev for sponsoring this video. And it all started over on the west part of the map, but I couldn't tame any of these guys without resorting to physical violence. So instead of that, I crossed over the ocean where I found a blue supply drop that requires level 25 to open. My plan was to loot a bunch of these drops to find some hide, because without killing things, it's really the only way to find hide. But after a quick Explorer Note run, where I read my 2 daily Bible verses for some XP, I leveled my weight to 300 and started pumping some health and fortitude to keep me alive. And now that I was level 25, I should be able to open the blue supply drop. Keyword should, because even though the drop had some pretty decent loot, there was one major problem. The 8th commandment says thou shalt not steal. And this supply drop does not belong to me. I'm not really sure who it belongs to, but it's not me. So instead, I donated the owners some stem berries, and Marty and I went on our merry way. Bro, this challenge is like impossible. I spent another 15 minutes or so finishing my Explorer Note run, running for my life, and leveling some more health and fortitude. And now I'm just gonna focus everything into movement speed so I can try and run away from everything, basically. But it was only day 2, and we've only seen 2 out of the 10 commandments so far. And the other 8 are all gonna be revealed as they come up. But with just 2, the challenge was already getting extremely difficult. But I do have a plan to take down all of the bosses and the Overseer without ever attacking anyone. I just don't know if my plan is actually gonna work, because it's never been done before, but we're gonna give it a shot. But first, I need to tame something that can help me clear the artifact kit. And it's gonna have to be one of these guys, because these are all the passive tames in this entire game. Half of them are completely useless, and half of them are carnivores, and I can't really get meat. But there was one tame here that stood out, and he's one of my favorites. The Gigantopithecus. These guys are passive tames. They eat berries, and they don't require a saddle or any hide to make one. It was actually perfect. Alright, now I just gotta find one. So after venturing out a bit too far, and almost seeing a lizard from the inside... No, please! Marty, we are staying away from the swamp. I decided to regroup back at the South Beach, where most people actually follow the no murdering rule. And on day 3, after farming up some berries for the road, it's so annoying having to eat berries for food, it was finally time to leave base and set out to find a Gigantopithecus. My goal was the Redwoods, because that's where Harambe spawns. But to make it to the Redwoods, I would first have to cross over this swamp, home to the most vile creatures in all of ARK. And since the swamp goes all the way around the Redwoods, there was no other option. And it looked like the coast was clear, so I went for it. I'm not really sure what was happening because I didn't look, but we made it to the other side. And now I just had to survive the Redwoods. All right, Marty, keep an eye out for a monkey man. I didn't see any Gigantopithecus on the south side of the Redwoods, but I did see a whole lot of degenerates. And among all of the chaos going on down there, there was one orphaned child. All alone. Okay, I swear I didn't do anything to his mother this time. And there's nothing in the 10 commandments against adopting children. In fact, I'd say that's a pretty noble thing to do. And that's what I did. And then I immediately regretted my actions. Because this terror baby, who was named Timothy, by the way, was in the middle of a war zone. And he was only in my custody for about 12 seconds when this happened. No, dude, stop that. I tried to reason with that man. I really did. You're gonna break the 6th commandment, dude. And it wasn't long before before Timothy the Terror Baby had entered the afterlife. But anyways, after grieving for about 7 seconds, the forest up ahead was way safer than the beach. And it wasn't long before I found this. Oh, there's a Gigantopithecus. Mr. Gigantopithecus was level 120, which was perfect. I just needed to tame him. But a few moments after feeding him one of my world famous Mayho berries, I saw some damage numbers over there by Marty. Oh no. And when I went over to investigate, I found 2 members of the Thieves Guild. One of them was assaulting Marty, but the other one decided to steal all of my berries, eat them in one bite, and instantly tame. What? Bro, I don't want you. Taming pegos is strictly forbidden in this challenge because they might influence me to become a thief and break the 8th commandment. So I unclaimed this heathen and continued the plan, which was not very fun because passive tames are always super annoying in this game. But taming this Gigantopithecus was one of the worst experiences I've had in my entire ARK career because not only did we experience some technical difficulties along the way. Okay, really, dude? But the Gigantopithecus, in the middle of his lunge, randomly got angry, and he murdered Marty. No! I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A blatant violation of the 6th commandment. But also, I was now completely stranded here, and if I didn't get this tame, I would lose basically everything. So I spent the next 15 minutes feeding berries to an ape, and it was going pretty great, until this man showed up. Yeah, boy. Oh no, please don't do it, man. Please don't hit the monkey. Oh no, he hit the monkey. A random Dilo has volunteered for death, but he also just reset the taming all the way back to 0%. And now I have to sit here for yet another 30 minutes. Yeah, this is gonna take a while. It was now day 4. And Harambe was now a member of the tribe. He also has a child, by the way, so I'm gonna have to raise him too. So on day 4, after almost taming another member of the Thieves Guild, okay, really? I noticed that Marty's lifeless corpse was just going to waste over there on the redwoods floor, and I wasn't responsible for his death, but since the deed had already been done, I might as well get some hide. 84 hide is not a lot, so I'm gonna have to spend it wisely, but I also needed to get back to base, and Harambe Jr. is just slowing me down. So after I finished admiring this fish doing some 360 no-scopes, excuse me, sir. You're lucky I'm a man of God. I farmed up some thatch, used Harambe's fiber collection ability, he's pretty good at it, and crafted a thatch foundation and some walls. Because Harambe Jr. here is gonna grow up in solitary confinement. Sorry, buddy, but I gotta go. Here's some berries. Try to ration those until you're a man. Because now that I was free from my responsibilities, it was time to find a new base location and take on the very first artifact caves. With no killing, of course. And I knew just the place. The southeast island on the island is called Herbivore Island. But out of every location on this entire map, anywhere that I choose to build will have carnivores spawning nearby that could attack my base and there would be nothing I could do about it. Because I'm not allowed to fight back. Everywhere except for this island. Because Herbivore Island is home to pacifists like me. And every single one of these fine gentlemen eats berries. And I'm not gonna lie, they're missing out on a lot by doing that, but I think we'll be safe here. So I used what was left of Marty to make a sleeping bag. Oh no, I meant to make a bed. And I just wasted 25 hide. And I was going to also make a refining forge and a smithy, but now I'm out of hide. Nice. I have to make some grappling hooks and some cryopods for my strategy in these caves. Because keep in mind, no matter how much of an upstanding citizen I may be, they're still gonna try to murder me. So I needed some more hide. So after reading some lore and using that to increase Harambe's movement speed, I came up with a plan. Physical violence happens very often on this game. And if I could just be in the area when it happens, I might be able to benefit from the aftermath. Just like I did with Marty earlier. So I casually stood next to Bowser while a pego assaulted my kneecap. Bro was unfazed. And it also didn't work with the trike, so I'm assuming it just doesn't work with pegos. But when I found some compies over here on the beach, who wanted to murder me of course, I led them astray over to Trike Wazowski. And sure enough, the compy bit the trike's toenail, and the trikes played ping pong. Now, I will admit, this is morally questionable behavior, but if this compy wasn't a degenerate, then this never would have happened. So is it really my fault that I'm harvesting his hide right now? Anyways, I repeated the process of walking near a few more heathens, watching them get eviscerated, and simply not letting their hide go to waste. Some things really tested my patience in the process. Bro, leave me alone. But I stuck to my morals, and on day 6, I headed back to my island abode. Because the next step in my plan requires some metal, and the refining forge isn't gonna cook itself. Herbivore Island is a pretty great base location overall, not just because the stuff doesn't want to kill me, but there's also a bunch of metal rocks over on the side here. Well, there was a few seconds ago. And for some reason, Harambe keeps eating everything in sight, acting like I never feed him.
Please, sir, I want some more.
The dude has like 2,000 fiber in his inventory. But anyways, I made a smithy, and I made a metal pickaxe, with the sole purpose of mining every metal rock on my entire island. And using the metal and this random lifetime supply of fiber that I inherited from Harambe for some reason to craft a metal hatchet and a crossbow. Now with this crossbow comes great power, and with great power comes great responsibility, because I will not be shooting any arrows out of this crossbow, but I will be shooting grapples. Yeah, these artifact caves are going to be interesting to say the least, but to make some grapples, I'm going to need some minting paste. Also, I do have a plan to knock out a pteranodon without hitting him myself, but it's going to be very complicated, and I hope it works. You'll see it soon. Because after spending the rest of day 6 heading to the mountains to farm some crystal, I became slightly depressed because I'm not allowed to grab this supply drop, and then I checked what time it was, and I'm really glad I did, because day 6 was almost over, and if I didn't make it back to base before midnight tonight, I would fail this challenge. The clock was ticking, and it was super close, but I did make it back right before day 7 began. Ooh, that was close. The reason I have to be at my base for day 7 is because of the 4th commandment. Thou shalt keep the Sabbath day holy. Meaning every 7 days in this challenge, on Sunday, I have to rest and keep the day holy. And today is Sunday. I really gotta make sure I'm paying attention to what day it is. Alright, get back to work. It was now day 8, and break time was over. Because if I wanted to take down all 4 bosses by day 100, without killing them of course, I needed some minting paste for some grapples. But beavers live all the way in the North Pole, and Harambe is kinda slow, and there's no flyers that I can passive tame to go faster. But I did have another idea, because in my storage box is what was left of Marty and the degenerates. And over in the water, I found an ichthyosaurus, one of the fastest tames in the game, and he's a pacifist. So after testing out his taste buds, and waiting on him to become hungry for some more uncooked Marty, Luke Seawalker was tamed. I also tried to tame this other higher level one, but he ran away. But anyways, I was pretty excited to use this guy. But when I unlocked the dolphin saddle at my base, I then immediately realized I have no hide to make it. Good times. I also almost failed the challenge inside my own home because a random Bronto tried to tempt me into stealing his unborn child. I almost just fell for that. And this is where things really started going wrong. Because as I left my base to farm some more hide, I decided to tame this other dolphin across the water. But the instant that a slice of raw Marty entered his digestive system, I got stuck. AAA game, by the way. And this was a problem. Because first of all,
I am under the water.
I'm drowning. I'm forced to see the backside of a dolphin's eyebrows, and there was a shark walking over. I wanted to punch this dolphin man in the face, from the back I guess, and be on my way. But unfortunately, that would be considered physical violence. But luckily, a few seconds later, the tame was finished. But the shark was still gonna be a problem. I tried everything I could, but Harambe wasn't fast enough to actually lead them away, and their oversized dorsal fins couldn't fit in the bay. It was too late. But at least I have some lunch now for tomorrow. That was super unfortunate, but those dudes are pretty easy to find, and I don't have a saddle for them anyways. So I decided to just walk up to the beaver lake on Harambe, and maybe I'll find something along the way for hide when I get back. And that was a pretty good plan at first, because when I arrived at the swamp, well, first of all, I collected some plant X seeds, and you'll see why I want those later, but also because this happened. Whoa! Mr. Capro was clearly not following the 6th commandment, so I reported him to the Parasaur authorities, and they sent him, legally speaking, to the Shadow Realm. Thanks, bro. I also did the same thing with the Titanoboa and the Sarco. We're gonna pretend like that didn't just happen. But anyways, I spent about 10 minutes sprinting across the universe and bungee jumping down into the beaver lake, where I found, and you won't believe this, some beavers. But this moment right here was the last moment of joy that I experienced all day. Because after witnessing a piranha trying to put a spin on my morals, I really wish I could punch you in the face right now, I found a beaver dam. And that was the problem. Because taking cementing paste from this beaver dam would be considered stealing and break the 8th commandment. And I didn't realize this until right now. I just came all the way up here for no reason, didn't I? Crafting cementing paste the old-fashioned way requires 4 chitin and 8 stone for 1 cementing paste. I don't know how these beavers do it, and that alone might take 100 days, but fortunately for me, on the way home, 3 saber-teeth were committing gang violence on me. And unfortunately for them, I called the cops, like a responsible citizen. Now, these dudes were relentless, but Mr. Stego was merciless. And in the end, all 3 of their teeth became sabered. Thanks, buddy. Wild saber-tooth drop keratin. And I totally didn't just do that on purpose knowing that they would. But that was only 9 keratin, which would craft a grand total of 2 cementing paste. And I would need like 118 more. So after finding this random light source coming from a floating piece of bamboo,
yes, science!
Day 9 began. And to make a fabricator, some cryopods, and finally start progressing in these artifact caves, and of course reveal the other 7 commandments and their brand new rules that come with them, I was being bottlenecked pretty hard by cementing paste. And even though the beavers don't want to donate me any, I found their suppliers. And it's almost time for a keratin montage, but just keep in mind while you're watching this, for every single clip you're about to see, I was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I am not responsible for any keratin owners that were harmed in the making of this video. So after I was done committing some ethically and definitely not morally questionable activities, I was able to amass 680 hide and 300 chitin. Yeah, it's not very much. I'm living paycheck to paycheck in a video game, bro. But I did have enough in the budget to make a singular mortar and pestle. And now, I just needed some more stone. So I grabbed my trusty hatchet, began metaphorically assaulting a very circular rock, and then, this happened. What? Did I just park the Red Sea? I'm pretty sure that has something to do with the new Lost Colony leveling system, but you'll see that in my next video. Back at my fortress, that has no walls, I was able to make a grand total of 20 cementing paste, and a pitiful amount of spark powder. But regardless of how we got here, we're in the big leagues now. Well, at least that's what I thought, until I tried to fit this piece of machinery inside my house. I think we bought the wrong size. So to fix the problem of my own design, I had to clock back into work and press the right trigger of my controller an astronomical amount of times, until I had crafted 15 of the sturdiest foundations this world has ever seen. In fact, they were so sturdy that LeBronto James walked directly through my living room. Bro, can you leave me alone? But I wasn't too worried about anyone stealing from my house, because that would be breaking the 8th commandment. And that's my excuse for not building walls. But now I was almost out of cementing paste again. And when I started this challenge, I might have underestimated just how much theft a man does when playing this dinosaur video game. But for the time being, I made peace with being poor and spent my last dime on 5 grappling hooks, because I had a big brain plan in mind. Because over in my inventory, there was a crafting recipe for 1 poison grenade, but I might be able to make people sleep without hurting them. First of all, I forced Harambe to farm berries at gunpoint until he had over 1,000, and I let him keep 3 for himself. And I used the rest of these berries to cook up some of the greatest drugs of all time. And now I just needed some gasoline to run the fabricator. And to make gasoline, I needed some oil. So I once again grabbed my trusty pickaxe, swam down into the depths of the ocean, And on day 12, I gaslit my refining forge, revved up the fabricator, and made a grand total of 4 poison grenades. And by the way, can we talk about how this recipe for poison grenades is like reading from the Library of Alexandria? Like, why do I need every resource known to man just to gas someone? But anyways, I really didn't want to use any more hide, but I upgraded to flak armor and made 5 bolas. Because with 4 poison grenades and no room for error, it was time to teach a birdman how to sleep. And over on the main beach, I found one. This level 85 gentleman had some pretty severe sleep deprivation, and I had to wait a minute for him to get the courage to land. But when he finally did, I pulled the pin and yeeted my favorite bedtime story directly at his kneecap. But despite sleepiness filling the air, it wasn't enough. So it was time for round 2 and initiated the triple sleep special. Are these things working? This man was unfazed. And at this point, I figured I should probably test out my own product. So I stepped forward, immediately got the urge to take a nap. And while this proves that my methods are effective, Mr. Birdman on the other wing was wide awake, walking through my sleep therapy and over my unconscious body. And that definitely was enough torpor to knock him out, but according to the ARK wiki, these grenades don't actually affect creatures, they only affect humans. This wasn't gonna work, but I did have a backup plan. Because over at my base, these tripwire trapped narcotic things are actually able to knock things out. But the problem is, it says here in the description that any creature knocked out by it cannot be tamed. However, this could still work, because using Dododex here, we can see every method for knocking out a creature. And while trank darts do minimal damage, I'm trying to not hurt the creatures at all, so that doesn't work. But what if I had someone else knock them out for me? Maybe someone who's not following the 10 commandments. And if you've been listening to what I was just saying, you might be thinking that getting a wild scorpion to hit a Rex 300 times and knock it out is kind of impossible. And right, you might be. But guess what?
We're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna do it anyway.
Bro, can you stop walking through my living room? I was having a moment. But anyways, I'm definitely gonna try that because one of the key dinos that I need to beat this challenge is a knockout tame. So in the meantime, I used the rest of my cementing paste to make a few more grapples, made a campfire to cook some raw heathen for breakfast, and set out to the lower south cave to find our very first artifact, the artifact of the hunter. There are 10 main artifacts on this entire map that are used to summon the 3 main bosses. And out of all of them, this cave is probably the easiest one. But in this challenge, they're all pretty difficult because as I entered the cave, there were 6-legged, 8-legged, and way too many legged cretins inside. So I just ran past all that, jumped down, and see, that's where I messed up. Because spiders shoot webs that slow you down. And even though I managed to dodge their sticky advances at first and make it past, the artifact chamber was too small for Harambe to fit. Oh no, he's too fat! And now I had to turn around. I tried to run back through the way I can, but the entrance was too high. And at this point, I thought my life was over. I dodged a lot of bugs that day, but webs were flying left and right, and 6-legged troglodytes were breaking every commandment in the book while attempting to break me. But there was still hope, because there was one more tunnel that opened up over here on the side. And now there's even more degenerates, but there was also enough room for me to at least have a chance. So I looped my way back around, and I was hoping that if I kited them all to the side, I could run over and grab the artifact. But what actually happened, well, first of all, it took about 5 minutes of me being physically, mentally, theoretically, spiritually, emotionally, and arachnophobically violated by cave-dwelling heathens. Oh no, I can't move! Not only did a random Arthroplera manage to spit on me and disintegrate my pants, shirt, helmet, gloves, shoes, and will to live, but when I jumped back down, half of the 7-nation army was standing there, ready to break the 6th commandment. And since there was only a couple of them, I tried to run over and quickly dismount for the artifact, but that was a pretty bad idea. Oh, they're in there too! Because not only was there way more spiders than I initially thought, oh no, move, bro! But Harambe's health was getting dangerously low. Luckily, everything was behind me though, and I managed to spam jump my way through the cavern while covered in spider webs, past the dudes that removed my pants, and out of the death trap. Guys, that was supposed to be the easy cave. Things were not looking great, to say the least, but I wasn't going to give up that easily, and I did have another idea. Because cryopods require polymer, and polymer is made from cementing paste, because everything's made from cementing paste, but it's also made from obsidian. And on this map, obsidian is pretty easy to find. I just have to go over here to the northeast mountain. So I spent day 13 riding on the shoulders of an oversized monkey man, profiting off of the downfall of some degenerates along the way. until eventually I made it to the mountain. I searched the entire top of this mountain, and there wasn't any obsidian anywhere, which made me feel lied to. But after mindlessly wandering around for about 10 minutes, I found some over here on the side of the mountain, right next to Mr. Scorpion. So I lodged my pickaxe into some minerals. And by the time I made it back to my herbivore abode, day 13 was already coming to an end. I think that took 20 minutes. I really need a flyer, bro. But I made it just in time to make the poly and craft this fancy armchair. Because not only is this chair very stylish, but day 14 was a Sunday. Meaning it was time to relax and keep the Sabbath day holy. Well, that was fun. But it was now day 15, and this is where things started to get interesting. Because with everything that I've worked so hard for in my entire 15 days of life, I was able to craft one single cryopod. I know it's not much, but this single cryopod is what makes these caves actually possible. Because this time, we're going on foot. And you're going in the Pokeball, young man. The first path in the cave was pretty empty, because we cleared it earlier in the most inefficient way possible. But when I made it to the artifact chamber, that's where it all went wrong. Because the moment the artifact left its container, I was spat on. And apparently, everything that I thought that I kited out of the way all decided to throw a surprise spider-like birthday party.
Hello there.
The now somewhat significant amount of degenerates did not value my life, and therefore I tried to run, juking spiderwebs left and right, but no matter what I tried, I found myself cornered, webbed, and afraid. The grapples did get me out of a couple sticky situations along the way, but it only works for about 3 seconds until I land back on the ground with about 273 legs walking towards me yet again, and it definitely wasn't graceful, but it was morally acceptable. And in the end, I actually made it out without harming any creeds, and without taking any naps. Harambe, that was so bad, bro. But the artifact of the hunter has been secured. And yes, you could technically say that me taking that artifact would be stealing and breaking the commandments, and you're almost right. But besides the fact that this video wouldn't exist if that was the case, well, according to the first and second commandments, you shall have no other gods before me, and you shall make no false idols. And these artifacts would be considered false idols because they're used to worship the overseer and his goons. I'm simply preventing that. Because Mama Brood, Papa Pithecus, and Doug himself, well, all 4 of these heathens have broken the first commandment because they're all pretending to be gods on this ark. And therefore, they must be taken down before day 100. Otherwise, I would be failing this challenge. But that doesn't mean, however, that I'm allowed to attack them. I just have to convince them to stop their sinful ways. Peacefully, somehow. And this is where things get tricky, because I have to tame a combination of creatures that can win a boss fight without attacking a single time. And I think I know how to do it, but no spoilers just yet. You'll see soon. Because all of this stone that I've been farming at base for the last 10 minutes will be used for cementing paste to make 4 tripwire narcotic traps. Also, this island just decided to become the North Pole for some reason. Why is it so cold, bro? So, I perished. And since meat is pretty scarce in this challenge, well, I couldn't let any of it go to waste.
You what?
It's a good thing respawning isn't against the 10 commandments. But anyways, like I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by death, I now had 1 out of the 3 artifacts for the Broodmother. But I was doing some research, and apparently she has 324,000 health on Gamma, which is kind of a lot when you're not allowed to attack. But the Megapithecus, on the other hand, he only has 180k. And that still sounds impossible, but at least it's half as impossible. I just needed the artifacts of the Devourer, the Brute, and the Pack. And step 1 of the master plan was to tame an Argentavis so I can pick up scorpions in my talons, non-violently of course, and allow said scorpions to knock things out that I may or may not have trapped and place tripwire narcotics next to. Alright, we got a lot of work to do. So after casting Wingardium Leviosa on this rock, wait, isn't witchcraft a sin? I commanded Harambe to punch some bushes and started farming up some more narcotics. It is kind of unfortunate that they take 5 to 7 business days to craft in the mortar and pestle, but there's no way I can afford a chem bench, so. But anyways, I made the rest of the tripwire traps, and I also made this super spyglass, which basically just shows how sleepy the dinosaurs are at any given moment. And that is the only gameplay mod that I'm using for this challenge, just because what I'm about about to attempt is borderline impossible. But after all of that planning and all of my hard work, it was finally time to leave. And what happened next would change the entire trajectory of this challenge. Because my house is on an island, so I'd be swimming every day, right? I'm practically Michael Phelps at this point. And I was expecting this to just be another normal day. But this time, the moment my toenail submerged into the ocean, this happened. What? Harambe has been kidnapped by a fish. Dude, give him back! And he was getting absolutely destroyed. I had no idea what to do. The only way to free your Tam from a Zyphactinus, which is that fish dude, is by punching him in the face. And as we all know, I cannot do that. So as Harambe was being pulled deeper and deeper into the land down under, I thought he was about to enter the afterlife. But what happened next will shock you. Literally. And I was no longer alive, but the shock freed Harambe from death's cold, fish-like embrace. And even though it was slim, there was hope. My plan was to use this other spyglass to whistle him while the fish was out of render distance, but that only lasted about 3 seconds, because on the way down, Mr. Zyphactinus decided to casually deal 24,000 damage and eviscerate that man. Well, that was overkill. And just like that, I was completely stranded with no Tams, except for Harambe Jr., who's on the other side of the universe inside of a box. But a few seconds later, this random dolphin appeared to rescue me for the small price of some raw meat. And sometimes things don't always go to plan, but in this case, I think it worked out pretty well. Because after being launched into satellite orbit by the tailbone of Lebronto James, I made a saddle for my brand new sea creature, almost immediately lost my brand new sea creature, and set out to continue the plan. Because this dolphin, who we're gonna call Lightning McQueen, might actually be an upgrade to Harambe. He was super fast, I'm gonna level his movement even more, and I can't fight things anyways, so it doesn't really matter that he's incapable of murder. And now that I can move around faster, I wanted to go somewhere that both Argies and Scorpions spawn. And that place was in the northeast corner of the map. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Degenerate Island. This place is extremely dangerous because it's the exact opposite of Herbivore Island and home to the dredges of our society. But in this case, that's actually a good thing because we needed an Argie and a Scorpion to spawn right next to each other. Also, I tamed this random dolphin as a backup. But on the start of day 17, it was time for some scouting. The first contestant on Who Wants to Sleep Tonight was only level 5, which is not great, but the other contestants worked much better. Level 20, 85, 25, 10. Oh, the 85 has 2 babies. According to the ARK wiki, one tripwire narcotic trap will deal 240 torpor, and it costs 30 narcotics just to make that, by the way. It's actually a scam. But that means that there's no way I'm taming a high level with these, because this level 10 with 900 torpor would require 3 tripwire narcotic traps. And this level 70 with 3000 torpor would require 13 tripwire narcotic traps or 390 narcotics. That's enough to knock out a Giga. But this is pretty much the only way that I can think of to knock something out without actually attacking it. And I decided to go for this level 25 RG because anything higher, it would just be way too difficult. So over on the beach, I set up a very nice house for our Argentavis brethren, and I was about to invite them inside. But then I saw a child. Where's your mother, young man? It seems that this child's mother was off attempting to break the 6th commandment. And I'm not saying that I would like for her to get decimated by that Carno so I can adopt her child, but I was thinking it. But anyways, while she was off committing some atrocities, I invited her cousin into my vacation home, locked the door behind her, to make sure that she's safe from the heathens. And with everything set up, I was about to start placing some tripwires. But unfortunately, this happened. Oh, well, there goes the backup dolphin. But while that was happening, the mother RG from earlier was officially deleted. Oh, she died. Let's go. Or, sorry, what I meant to say was, oh no, what a tragedy. I can't believe that this happened. But the Carno wasn't stopping at the mother. And as a last ditch effort, I tried to throw out Lightning McQueen so I could use the cryo to cryo the guy, but it was too late. Well, I had an RG for 10 seconds, but the other dude was still in the trap. And another random RG got revenge on that carnivorous sociopath over there. And with the area being safe for once, this was the best chance that I was gonna get. So I searched along the beach until I found this level 70 Scorpion a few blocks down. And with everything finally ready, I just had to execute the plan. Okay, we actually might be able to pull this off. So it was time to place the tripwires, but I've never actually used these before. And I placed 2 of them on each side of the vacation house, right? And then I realized, oh, wait. He's a bird. Clearly, he wasn't gonna just walk into my trap, so I did it myself. And when the green fumes reached this man's nostrils, it did 120 torpor. So I tried again, but the second time it was even worse. Well, there goes 60 narcotics. And I'm pretty sure that he's too high and mighty for my sleep potions, but I did have another idea. I was hoping that this foundation and this pillar would allow me to get on his level. And I was going to put the traps on top of these pillars, but it actually just got him stuck, and I guess that works too. And now that he was a little bit lower to the ground, the next 3 sleep potions all entered his nostrils without any issues. And with Mr. Hulk Hogan here about 3/4 of the way to a good night's sleep, it was time to bring in the backup, aka Leonardo da Vinci. That man was playing Ring Around the Rosie with a seagull. And when I got his attention, he randomly started running the other way. Hello?
Why are you running?
I think this guy might have a disability. It took a second for his scorpion brain to register, but he eventually remembered that he indeed does want to murder me. It didn't last very long though, because after chasing Leonardo da Vinci across an island, I began evaporating. So I placed down a sleeping bag and accepted my fate. But after my morning reincarnation, we arrived back at my vacation home where Leonardo was more interested in committing war crimes than helping me. But after taking a little break to start a babysitting business on the side for babies with saber teeth. I don't even have a cryopod for this guy. Well, I was trying to prevent this giant insect from devouring my adopted child. But the Scorpion AI is absolutely horrendous in this game, and it had me distracted for a few minutes. Just long enough that in the background, I didn't even realize my mortal enemy was visiting the trap house. Oh no! This Cerato was trying to kill more than just the RG's ability to stay awake. And in the process, he committed manslaughter on Leonardo. Everything was slowly falling apart. And I tried my best to kite this man away from the trap to try to salvage what I had left. But every single time that I got his attention, I turned back around 3 seconds later and bro has somehow teleported back to the RG. And this time, the trap wasn't enough to save me. Oh no, he's dead. The RG had perished. And at this point, I was getting pretty tired of these hooligans blatantly breaking the 10 commandments. But after reading the autobiography of Kermit the Frog, simply to distract myself from what just happened, well, pretty much everything was gone. And things were looking pretty bad. But there was still a very small sliver of hope. Because that RG was a single mother, and her level 20 child was still alive. He was just flying 30 feet in the air, terrified for his life, which is understandable. But 5 minutes later, bro was still in the sky. And at this point, I wasn't really sure which would come down first, the traumatized baby RG or the yellow supply drop that landed on top of some oxygen molecules up there. In normal circumstances, I would probably just move on and find a new RG, but for this challenge, this is basically a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So even though this is probably getting a little bit repetitive, no matter how long this man takes to get over his past trauma, I will wait, and you, sir, will be adopted. Alright, this is absurd. The baby RG has successfully trolled me. And I even tried swimming around the entire island, but none of the other children were up for adoption. And I was about to just give up and leave right there. Until I saw this. Long story short, Leonardo da Vinci was back from the dead. And he was given some sleep therapy to this inexperienced Birdman, the brother's level 5. And I was really hoping that he would knock him out, but the Argentavis decided to leave without finishing his bedtime stories. So, yeah, that didn't work either. I really don't like the way you're looking at me right now. So at this point, the baby RG has vanished off the face of the earth, the baby with saber teeth has been digested, and all of my tripwire narcotic traps have all been used on someone who is no longer alive. Good times. That definitely didn't go as planned. But if you're watching this video right now, I guess I didn't give up that easy. Because after making a quick trip to the northeast mountain to grab yet another stack of obsidian, Day 19 began, and I used my entire cementing paste life savings to make 12 more polymer, did a world record speedrun on Lightning McQueen, and arrived at the red obelisk. Because all of my cementing paste may be gone, but having more than one cryopod was definitely worth it for what we're going to be doing next. Because after skydiving into a pool filled with megalodons, and getting stuck on every rock in existence, I swam up the river, ran through the swamp, almost died 4 different times in the process, remind me to never go there again, witnessed a mosquito that was bigger than my house break all 10 commandments at the same time, and finally arrived at my destination. I think you guys probably know why I'm here at the Redwoods, but if you don't, well, let me show you. Hey son, told you I'd be back. It's been 19 years, and I missed his entire childhood, but Harambe Jr. was now a full-grown man, and he didn't even seem to mind growing up inside of a cardboard box. But anyways, after some micro-degeneracy, I was ready to take Harambe Jr. home, when I found a level 150 Gigantopithecus. Oh, no. Oh, that man was clearly not following the 6th commandment. In fact, after he won that fight with the Thyla, bro just kept beating his lifeless corpse for like 5 minutes. Calm down, Furious George. I really needed a second Gigantopithecus to breed a monk-like army. And even though this man was clearly accustomed to violence, I knew deep down that I could change his ways. So I spent the next 20 minutes placing purple berries beneath a monkey man's tongue. And on day 20, Furious George has been tamed. His health was actually pretty good, and that's really the only stat that I cared about since they can't have movement speed levels in the wild. So I cryoed Harambe Jr., demoting him to a 2nd-class monkey man, and made my way home past this Florida man that was crip walking while unhinging his jaw. That was kind of impressive. Oh, and I also saw this Titanosaur fall from heaven. Bro must have broke the commandments and got kicked from the lobby. But anyways, I made it back to my island, being very careful to watch out for anything fishy along the way. I really need to make a raft, bro. And despite everything that went wrong over the last 3 days, Harambe Jr. was actually a female, meaning I had a breeding pair of Gigantopithecus. It's time to breed an army. But as the mating commenced, I realized something. Oh, wait, no, stop. I realized that these 2 civilians were about to breed, and they're not married. And not only is premarital breeding against the rules, but the 7th commandment states, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." And this has 2 potential meanings for this challenge. First of all tames must be married before mating. And finally, all tames can only mate with their husband and wife, because any cheating in a marriage is considered adultery, and that would break the 7th commandment. And that, ladies and gentle soars, is why we're gonna have a wedding. Furious George was now engaged to his future wife, named Harambe Jr. And the only other tame that I have is Lightning McQueen the dolphin here, so I forced him to get certified online for $50. But the wedding's about to start, so I'll be quiet.
By the power bestowed upon me by legitpastorcertification.com, I now pronounce you monkey and wife. Oh, dude, not on the table. You may now mate with the bride.
Shout out to my editor for becoming a dolphin pastor just to voice that segment. But on day 21, while the newlyweds were mating, I was busy resting because it was a Sunday. And once again, the 4th commandment does say that we have to keep the Sabbath day holy. Sorry, I'll just look over here. On day 22, Harambe Jr. gave birth to a baby boy named Chewbacca. And after his father, Furious George, went to the store for some berries to feed him, I made 6 more grapples, and I'm now completely out of chitin and cementing paste, but I think I'm okay as long as I have grapples. Because after I let Furious George take his anger out on some bushes, farming an illegal amount of narco berries in the process, well, I was gonna need a lot more narcotics if I ever wanted to tame that Archie. And by a lot, I mean like a few thousand. And I did manage to split this meat into a stack of 40 that was about to spoil. And then I did some inventory management magic to combine all of the other stacks into the low spoil timer main stack, and then I split all of those too, and now I have 157 spoiled meat. But anyways, that was going to take a while to cook, and Chewbacca was going to take a while to stop being such a child. So in the meantime, I put his father inside of a Pokeball, and I set out for the Upper South Cave for the artifact of the pack. The easiest of the 3 needed to take down Papapithecus. But in this challenge, even the easiest of the caves are nearly impossible. And this cave is no exception, because when I made it to the first area and looked down, well, we have some snakes and all the bugs from earlier, pretty standard stuff, but we also have some mega rabies connoisseurs. It's not gonna be a problem on the way in, and I did manage to sneak down this tree branch, basically skipping that entire pit of doom. And when the bats tried to physically assault me, you know, as they do, I was already gone. Now, me relocating all this stuff to the middle of the cave is going to be a serious problem on the way out, but we'll worry about that later. Because right now, after saying hello to a bat cosplaying as a tree, hey, how's it going, dude? I made my way through the first half of the cave, and this is the easy part because all the hard parts are kind of optional in here, at least until you reach the final chamber. And that's where the degenerates are.
I'm a snake.
I was forced to turn around because running straight into Snake Island is probably not something that an intelligent person would do, and I headed back to this little area over here, where I put Furious George into a delirious Pokeball. Because this cave is going to be a lot easier on foot, because grapples make things a lot easier. And after running past all the dudes in the ruins on the right, well, that's where it got kind of crazy. I wasn't expecting so many heathens to exist in this world, but with a 5-star wanted level, I launched my grapple at the exit point.
The police, they are after me.
This grapple spot specifically, it's supposed to be the way out, and I just effectively skipped 75% of the cave, by the way. And if you were wondering, this water right here, it's where you're supposed to come out, but I'd consider doing that a violation of the Geneva Convention. And in this footage, I'm looking at the water here because I was wanting to explain to you guys that that's the way you're supposed to go, right? But I wasn't really paying attention, and I almost got put into a sarcophagus. I think it's time to leave. But as I approached the exit cliff, all of the cretins were back in their natural habitat, and there were only 2 bats blocking the way as far as I could tell, so it didn't look too bad, but that water is a death trap, and I gotta avoid that. So after climbing down to sea level, I attempted to grapple that crystal over there, but it was too far away. And when I grappled the ceiling instead to like branch over, well, there was an input delay or something. Oh, no, dude, what was that? But even though I almost died that day, the bats will go hungry tonight, and that makes me pretty happy. Oh, that was so close. I feel like every cave I do in this challenge is going to be as sketchy as humanly possible to beat. But anyways, I still had to get out of here. And Furious George was a bit too overweight after that Thanksgiving dinner last week, but that was okay because that's what Pokeballs are for. The rest of the Upper South Cave consisted of some snakes, some spiders, and some more snakes, and all of that was fine until I made it to this tree root, where I found myself on a tree branch that defies all laws of physics and somehow supports the weight of a giant monkey. And the snake found himself staring at the ceiling menacingly. I tried doing some monk-like parkour, but that just made things even worse. But then I remembered that I can just grapple out, and yeah, somehow I'm still alive. And even though both me and Furious George are on the brink of death, the artifact of the pack has been secured. That was pretty difficult though. And the other 2 artifacts to summon Papapithecus are gonna be even worse. Because the artifact of the Brute is in the underwater cave, filled with my mortal enemy. And the artifact of the Devourer is surrounded by about 50 wings, and not the good kind. But anyways, it was now day 23. And every time I swim into my driveway now, I gotta be on the lookout for a giant fish that might kidnap my monkey and my happiness. And to prevent that from happening, I decided to finally make a rat. Alright, no more fish, we'll have fried Harambe for lunch. I can see their disappointment from here. And I was planning on going for the next artifact and then trying to tame another Argy with the tripwire scorpion method. But when I returned back to my base, the plans changed. Wait, Harambe, where is little Chewbacca? Because young Chewbacca has allegedly starved to death. Wait, what? And I'm not really sure how that happened because I left him plenty of berries to last from the age of 1 until 18. But alas, he is no longer with us. And there was no time for grieving because I was already breeding a backup Chewbacca Jr. as we speak. And after spending a solid 15 minutes farming some more narco berries for the tripwire traps and realizing that I have no spoiled meat for the tripwire traps, Chewbacca Jr. has joined the lobby. And now I want to explain myself real quick because what happened next was not in line with the 10 Commandments. My intention was to aggressively slam Mr. Monkey's fist into this bush to farm berries. But what actually happened, well... Oh no! The bush was actually a baby Phiomia in disguise. I had unintentionally attempted murder, and now his father wanted to execute me. I'm sorry, bro, I didn't mean it. And it took about 5 minutes for Peppa Pig to get amnesia and forget that I was a bad person, but when he finally did, we were all good. And I spent the rest of day 23 just doing some stuff around my base and preparing for the next cave, because I needed some metal to repair my armor, and I needed a feeding trough because one too many descendants of Chewbacca have starved to death in my custody. If this isn't enough berries for you, young man, then we're gonna have a problem. As day 23 came to an end, I took baby Chewbacca for the longest walk of his childhood. I'll see you in 18 years, buddy. And I started off day 24 by realizing that I am poor and have no wood. because I really needed to tame an RG, and with 19 cementing paste and 300 narcotics, I was able to make 6 tripwire traps. But as I was saying earlier, I need like 16 of these tripwire traps. So while Furious George was recovering from his minor flesh wounds, Harambe and I boarded the fish avoider to avoid what happened last time, uncryoed Lightning McQueen, and started searching for literally anything that can give me kite and some meat, because this man is participating in the Hunger Games right now. So after attempting to cryo Lightning McQueen, dude, I need to cryo him because he's starving, but he's injured because he's starving, and I can't cryo him because he's injured, and avoiding the Capro onslaught, I was able to get these heathens to pick a fight with Bowser over here. But apparently, he's also doing the 10 Commandments challenge.
Finally, inner peace.
So I stood there for 5 minutes, and I now have 8 keratin, which is still not enough. So I continued observing the joys of nature. Did you really just die to that? And the misfortunes of nature. Until I had about 75 kite. How are you still alive? Oh, well, there goes my shirt. On day 25, I made it back to base, and Chewbacca made it into adulthood. His free trial at life has expired, and after I turned the kite and I just got into a whopping 21 cementing paste, I managed to make 6 more tripwire traps. How's it going, gentlemen? So on day 25, I wanted to breed Chewbacca with Furious George, because he has the best stats. But then I realized that not only would that be breaking the 10 Commandments, but it's also wrong in several other ways. So instead, I encouraged the married couple to have a second child, did some chores around my base while I was waiting on the second child, and made it back just in time. And now while I was waiting for Chewbacca Jr. to become a man, or a woman, I mean, I leveled up Chewbacca Jr. to around 10k health to prepare for some of the artifact caves, and while he was healing up, it was time to finally use these tripwire narcotic traps to tame an RG, or try to. So after a game crash and my map resetting for some reason, I made my way over to Carno Island to the trap house.
What the dog doing?
And there weren't any RGs or scorpions around here, so I put a few giant gateways inside my backpack, and I began my search to find an RG and a scorpion who happened to be next door neighbors. What is bro doing? Every single RG on this entire island was pretty bad, but there was a scorpion. So after I accidentally pressed my left trigger, which turned Harambe into the pitcher for the Dodgers, I was the baseball, I managed to set up the trap and trap the scorpion dude, and I began luring over the RG. Well, that didn't work. And not even 3 seconds later, I turned around and witnessed Mr. Scorpion dead on the floor with a Ceratow walking away from the crime scene. Luckily, there was another Scorpion that was nearby though, and there was also another Ceratow. Okay, I need to go somewhere else. So on day 26, after kiting the entire mafia across the Pacific Ocean, and over on the other side, I found 3 organic trank arrows. I couldn't let this opportunity go to waste, so I lured one of them to the side island while slowly being cooked alive, found a level 90 RG beefing with a Rex, and a level 10 RG fighting it out with some sentient trank darts. He's indisposed at the moment, and it took a while, because every time I found an RG or a Scorpion, they either died or there was just way too much danger nearby. But after about 10 minutes of searching, the best thing I found were a couple baby RGs that were level 5. Oh wait, no, that one's level 7. The island was really living up to its reputation of everything being a terrible level. But on the morning of day 27, after kiting away all these degenerates from the side island, I finally managed to trap this level 20 RG. And even though he was only level 20, this was a huge opportunity, because there was another Scorpion on this side island and everything else was over on the mainland. But after a solid 10, maybe 15 minutes of trying to get this man's brain-rotted TikTok attention span into the trap. Over here, buddy. Okay, why? Why are you running? Okay, what is happening right now? Ow, okay, well, I guess I did ask you to do that. And I got so close so many times. No, come back! But after the 37th time that he ran to his mother, I saw this. Oh no. A couple of newlywed Rexes have just came from Love Island over there. and I managed to kite them all the way back over to their island, but at this point, the heat wave was already back. My health was dropping pretty fast, and I had to do this now. Luckily, there was another scorpion over here, and I had him over by the trap now. And with my health getting pretty low, I threw caution to the wind a little bit, and I went for it. Oh, this guy's actually following me. This scorpion was much more intelligent than his directionally confused brother. Or maybe his brother was smarter, to be honest. Because I managed to open the door, get him inside, and I didn't even care that he turned me into a human pincushion. Oh, finally. Because all that mattered was he was in the trap. At least that's what I thought, but my body was telling me something different. Because not only was I about to die from severe heat stroke, but I was so ridiculously tired from the very high quality bedtime stories from that scorpion that I could not resist. I had to take a nap. While nap time was in session, the Archie and the scorpion were not fighting each other, which was definitely a good thing, because I needed to use the tripwire traps before they did that. But someone else was fighting, and that someone was my lungs. At this point, I wasn't sure which would run out first, my oxygen or my melatonin, and it was super close down to the wire. But at the very last second, I woke up with 13.1 health. Dude, how am I still alive right now? After I awoke from my slumber, there was another RG volunteering for some sleep therapy on the beach. But I had some more pressing matters at the moment, because if I leave the water, I am going to die. So I just kind of sat here until the heat wave was over, and I didn't even notice that Lightning McQueen was starving to death in the process. Everything was going wrong. And by the time I was finally ready to start setting up the tripwires, it was too late. I knew that was gonna happen. But on the bright side, at least I have some hide for a sleeping bag, I guess. But anyways, I realized that Mr. Scorpion was a little bit too fat to get over those pillars inside the cage. So therefore, there's no possible way that he could escape.
So I built this cage to keep him secure, so there's no possible, oh my god.
At this point, I was thinking about giving up and just never taming the RG and maybe trying to figure out something different. But right before I left, literally while I was running away from this Rex, I ran straight into this. Oh, hello. Please go into the Pokeball. Sometimes things have a weird way of working out, and sometimes they like to rub it in your face and give you a second one. Could you not have done that like 2 hours ago? So just like that, I went from having 0 RGs to having 2. And even though they were only level 15 and level 5, it was better than nothing. So now that I was finally done with that, I trapped this level 75 RG for later, fed a starving artist, and headed home. And it's a good thing that I did, because day 28 was the day of the Lord. So I fed the baby RGs with the 20 meat that I had, gathered around with the Council of Monkey, and relaxed on the Sabbath day. It was now day 29, and I was ready to take on the underwater cave for the artifact of the brute. But I was also kind of worried that the RGs would starve because I only had 20 raw meat. So the cave is gonna have to wait for about 1 more day because I really just didn't want to have to worry about this anymore. And I spent the next hour and a half witnessing tragedies that I was totally not responsible for and not letting any meat go to waste. And just like that, 151 insects have been relocated into my inventory. And after getting some nostalgia from my childhood home, I put this useless member of our family into a Pokeball, summoned Lightning McQueen, and headed back home. Because on day 31, back at my island abode, I put some meat into the troughs to feed these hungry specimens. And unfortunately, feed this waste of oxygen. The 10 Commandments forbid me from dropping him into the ocean. I grabbed some necessary supplies and set out to find the second artifact for Papapithecus, the artifact of the brute. Or, well, I'm gonna try to. Now, normally this cave wouldn't be too difficult on a normal playthrough, but in this playthrough, I'm following the 10 Commandments, and that means that some of these heathens must stay alive, unfortunately. Also, Lightning McQueen was going on a hunger strike again. Okay, I know we fast during Lent, but bro, this is taking it too far. So after outplaying a degenerate, I collected his inheritance, which was 12 meat, by the way, and spent the rest of day 31 searching for something, literally anything. Where is everyone? If Lightning McQueen continues to participate in the Hunger Games, this cave is not gonna go well. And that's why I really needed to find meat. And I didn't know it at the time, but when I updated my game yesterday, the launch settings turned off prevent hibernation, and now like a bunch of creatures aren't spawning in, but I fixed it pretty soon, so don't worry. Anyways, after some non-violent activities with this friendly neighborhood raptor, Lightning McQueen was no longer on a hunger strike, and we were now ready to grab the artifact of the brute. I was absolutely terrified of this cave, mainly because of the eels, like I've said 8 times, and even though I was just using a dolphin and there wasn't that much to lose here, I took it very slowly, checking all of my corners as I entered the cave. And every turn that I made, as I got deeper and deeper into the cave, I was expecting some underwater heathens to ambush me, but I didn't see anything above the water or below. At one point, I just started farming some silica pearls, but as I made it over to the back chamber, there was an ominous glow, and that's where things started to actually get scary. But I swam as fast as I could into that back artifact room, witnessed a scorpion doing some backstrokes, and I managed to grab the artifact with 0 difficulty, which was very suspicious. But I'm not complaining, because I made it out of there and I only saw a couple jellyfish, maybe like 1 megalodon, and that random scorpion that was practicing for ballet class. Well, that was anticlimactic. But with the artifact of the brute finally secured, the only artifact left to take on Papapithecus was the artifact of the devourer. And that one was going to be much, much more difficult. And I do still also need to figure out what tames I'm going to bring into the boss fight, you know, to convince Papapithecus to die without me actually killing him. And that's where these guys come in. Duolingo and McClucken were now 18 years old. Their free trial at life has expired, and it was time for work. Duolingo is going to help me tame some other creatures, but first I needed some chitin to make him a saddle. So I set out. Oh! And after spending 35 minutes trying to find some more chitin, and I'm not even exaggerating, by the way, I finally found some. Because this monkey here was 1v4ing some dilos. So I decided to be a good Samaritan and kite over this brigade of bugs to help him out. I guess he didn't want my help, and I seem to have found some chitin. And by the way, I've been cutting most of this out because it's pretty boring, but I just keep sprinting around the map for like 20 minutes at a time trying to find chitin I can actually farm. It's actually terrible, but at least I found some. And I was able to make the elusive RG saddle. I decided to give it a Duolingo since he's a little bit better, and I also put McClucken inside a Pokeball, harvested some stone, so when I entered the cave, I made sure, and now everything was ready. It was finally time to tame the very first creature to start an army for Papapithecus. You guys are going to get to see what I'm going to use for that very soon. Because after realizing that Duolingo has the stamina of a crippled sloth, and that one was not so easy. The much, much more difficult artifact of the Devourer. But with the artifact of the Brute, and that makes things a little bit more difficult, but either way, picking up these scorpions is what allows me to actually tame dinos in this challenge and makes it actually possible. But now we had another problem. My RG doesn't have enough health to not die when I'm carrying them. And the highest level I could find on this entire island was level 80. Oh, that might actually work. Are you good? Kind of crazy how every time I play this game, I discover a new glitch. I needed to convince that level 80 RG's mother to let me adopt him, but it wasn't gonna be easy, because then this happened. I was dying fast, and I had to get off this island. So I abandoned this random level 10 RG baby that I just claimed, uncried Lightning McQueen, almost got assassinated by a squad of rap gods, and I stopped being frozen. Lightning McQueen was very happy. But anyways, I made this torch to keep myself toasty and unfrozen, and I made this campfire because while I was waiting on it to warm up over there, I wanted to test another theory that I had. Are there any volunteers? The plan was simple. I was going to use this volunteer right here as bait, and I wanted to see if I hover above this campfire if Mr. Scorpion would be dumb enough to get spit roasted. Okay, well that didn't work. But the experiment must go on, because this time we had Mr. Saber here, and he was going to walk through the fire and flames on expert difficulty. It looks like he was taking about 5 damage per tick, which isn't a lot, but the concept does work, and it's not my fault technically that he decides that he wants to chase me over a burning campfire. Like, if you aren't a murderer, then that's not gonna happen. So technically, I'm not breaking any of the 10 commandments, and I'll keep that in mind for later. But anyways, I got off track, and it was time to get back to the plan, because there was still a level 80 baby RG that needed an adult in his life, and apparently there was a lot more than just one. Are they having a family reunion reunion. So I took his mother on a business trip over to the other side of the island, where I introduced her to her brand new co-worker. Oh, they're getting along so well. But after some workplace casualties, the baby had followed his mother, which is kind of traumatizing, but now he was hovering over the Ceratow. So I kited that dude away, finally claimed the baby. That was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And then I found another one who I surprise adopted. And just like that, I now had 2 high-level baby RGs, both of them being the opposite gender. But I wasn't exactly sure if they came from the same parents, so breeding them was potentially unethical. So I kept searching just to see if I could find one more good level RG, maybe above 100, but instead I found this. Level what? How is that even possible? But after I finished spectating the pinnacle of mid, I dropped this saber into the ocean for the crime of existing and swam back home. This time around, I made sure that the babies actually had some food, and while I was waiting on them to grow up, I farmed enough resources to make 20 campfires, traumatized the children by catching hypothermia in my own home, and farmed them a little bit of extra food. You know, I just now realized that farming the body like that might be questionable, but they're eating it and it's not me, so I guess it's okay. But anyways, I spent the rest of day 35 testing out some campfire stuff, which didn't really work that well, so I won't talk too much about it. But at the start of day 36, the RGs were fully grown up, which means it's finally time to get those tames for Papapithecus. The plan was simple, because out of the 122 dinos that all spawn on the island, only one of these dinos can help me beat the map while honoring the 10 commandments. And that creature is the Kentrosaurus. Kentros have the ability to reflect damage that they take back at their attackers. And if I'm just standing there, minding my own business, not attacking anyone, and a random dragon named Doug decides to punch me in the face, well, it's not my fault if he takes some damage from that. I just needed 19 Kentros. Also, I'm not even sure if this is gonna work. So I grabbed some uncooked meat because Lightning McQueen is still doing a year-long water fast, swam over to the North Mountains where they usually spawn, and started searching for some spiky boys. Now, I first thought that finding a Kentro on this map would be pretty easy, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Because after spending about 20 minutes flying around the entire map, twice, I realized that when ARK updated or something, I forgot to have prevent hibernation on my launch code. And if you don't know what that means, basically all the spawns are messed up and nothing's really spawning it. But I fixed it, and then everything I found was like level 5. So I decided to bite the bullet and I installed another mod for this challenge. This is the Dino Finder mod that I use every time I play with any other mods in my videos. And it's not really doing anything special. It basically, as the name suggests, just shows me where dinos are that are already spawned in on the map just to save me a little bit of time. But anyways, after some aerial activities, I found a level 140 Kentro just 1900 meters away. Oh, thank you. This was huge because you guys didn't see it, but for me, this has been over an hour of searching for these guys, and I was pretty excited. But that excitement didn't last long because when I arrived at the mountain, I found this man beefing with a saber. So I patiently waited on him to finish with that, and then I checked out his stats. And this was the problem. There's only one stat I care about on Kentros, and it's their health. And for a 140, his health is definitely left a bit to be desired. I wasn't sure yet if I was going to tame this guy. But while he was healing up from his war crimes, I headed back home while fighting off my hypothermic mortal enemy, crafted some more cementing paste, and now I just needed the narcotics to make the tripwire narcotic traps, and I also need an actual trap to trap this guy. How's it going, gentlemen? So on day 37, I figured out which of my monkeys had the highest melee. It was Chewbacca Jr. He's been hitting the gym. Because higher melee means you get more berries from punching bushes. Don't question it. And now I just needed the spoiled meat. So I took yet another trip over to Carno Island, saw this. I guess that's what happens when you obey all 10 commandments. And long story short, I farmed a bunch of meat, but it was all gone because McClucken is a fan of the Hunger Games. It took a while, but after witnessing a deathmatch between a level 5 Ceratow and a level 25 Labronto James, I almost had enough spoiled meat. I just needed this Dilo to commit some degenerate activities on this Ovis. Okay, was that necessary? Anyways, that took a while. But at the end of day 38, I split all of my meat to spoil and attended some sleep seminars. But the mortar and pestle takes forever to craft narcotics. So while I was waiting on that, I farmed up some stone to make a Kentro trap. Crafted some more tripwire traps once the narcotics were done crafting, and it was finally time to carpet bomb a Kentro with tripwire nyclo traps. It takes about 3 business days to reach the mountains, and when we arrived, there wasn't really any good flat areas to build my trap, so I settled for this small plateau, invoked Mr. Kintro's anger for invading his personal space, and checked his levels of insomnia. With each tripwire trap doing 240 torpor, it would take about 20 of these things to knock it out, meaning 40 total sets. And I had 19. Luckily, Leonardo da Vinci, the world-renowned sleep specialist, was not too far away. And since the tripwire traps can't knock him out anyways, Leonardo would have to finish the job. So I began placing down my traps, strung some wires between them, watched as Mr. Kintro broke said wires, and began filling his lungs with airborne NyQuil. Bro, what are you doing? The Kintro was at 4.3k torpor, and now he just needed 400 more. And I'm not really sure why the dude's doing the cha-cha slide, but it was time to bring in the sleep specialist. And by the way, I discovered that the tripwire traps don't actually affect me because I'm the one that placed them down, which is a perfectly logical game mechanic if you ask me. But anyways, I flew over and airlifted Mr. Scorpion, and he wasn't very happy about that. But when he saw his brand new cellmate, his mood went from mad to extra mad. And since the Kintro was running away because his torpor was really high and that's when they start running, I didn't really have to worry about the Scorpion dying. And when I was going into this challenge, I wasn't sure if this would ever work, but that man's acupuncture methods were highly effective. And even though he was doing more damage than he was torpor, it actually worked, and it wasn't long before Mr. Kintro threw a slumber party. I'm pretty sure the Scorpion hit him like 1 or 2 more times after the knock, but I airlifted him away from the premises, summoned Furious George to farm berries for the tame, and a few minutes later, the Scorpion was back. How did you get all the way back over here? I guess that man was mad that I was stealing his tame.
Are you feeling mad?
But with the extracurricular activities taken care of for the day, it was time for the main event. So I farmed some more narco berries with my pal George, shoved them right down Mr. Kintro's esophagus, and it looks like he's gonna take about 40 minutes to tame. Normally I would kinda stay around the area and make sure that the tame finished safely, but I don't really have time for that. So I cryoed Curious George and swam back home, hoping that if I was out of render distance, nothing bad would happen. Because while I was waiting on her to tame, I needed to farm some more narco berries to tame another Kintro to breed my non-violent, ultra-pacifist army, after their arranged marriage, of course. And once I had enough narco berries to cure a sleep epidemic, and I grabbed some high-quality seeds right from Chewbacca's pocket. Because after farming a bit more stone, I wanted to make some large crop plots and some thatch foundations for a greenhouse. Because my Kintros are going to be taking a ton of damage. And since being vegan is not directly breaking any of the 10 commandments, my plan was to make some veggie cakes using the vegetables from my farm so I could heal them. And at this point, I've been farming stuff at base for about 20 minutes, and the Kintro was 44% tame. I still had another 20 minutes to kill. So I began extorting some feces from the vegetarians of the island, repaired my armor, made some sleeping bags and some grapples, and brought all of this excrement over to Carno Island. Because I needed fertilizer, and for that, I needed to tame a bowel movement connoisseur. And while I'm there, I'm gonna try to get the artifact of the Devourer as well. That's the last one to fight Papapithecus. So after making a quick trip to this mountain to check on Sleeping Beauty, I arrived at Carno Island, where I sprinted past some local heathens and placed my sleeping bags over by the water. And this time, I'm gonna use Chewbacca Jr., because Furious George and Harambe Jr., they're the only monkeys with a marriage certificate. And that means they're the only ones that can make backups, and I can't lose them. But anyways, after the water tunnel, I poked out my head, and I was immediately greeted with some flying rodents from 5 feet away. There was also a descendant of Leonardo da Vinci. I wasn't really sure how I was gonna deal with the bats, but I placed some medium feces in my hotbar to try and sneak feed Mr. Dung Beetle, and maybe I wouldn't have to. But the minute I crossed over into enemy territory, Batman himself tried to send me to Arkham Asylum. So I turned around, immersed myself in some cave water because I lost aggro, and somehow when I came back up, they were over there stuck on the crystal. But those bats were just the beginning, because when I looked down, I saw this. Oh my. There was way too many bats in this cave. This was really bad. And at this point, I'm not even gonna make it 10% of the way down there without catching mega rabies. I cannot do this cave yet. So I set my focus back onto the stinkiest member of the beetles. I can't just walk over and tame the guy because he's being guarded by Mr. Pinchy. But I thought that maybe I could push him off the ledge. And after being impaled 83 times, it went horribly wrong. Because instead of him getting pushed off the ledge, he pushed me. But luckily, this giant mushroom saved my life. And what Mr. Scorpion didn't account for was that I have kneecaps and he does not. So I was able to jump safely back onto the ledge, and then I forgot to unpause my recording. I spotted the stinkiest member of our society. So I walked over, pulled out the toxic waste that came from Chewbacca, and changed this man's life. He ate the whole thing in one bite. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how I hired a man named Reese's Feces as the head developer at my new fertilizer company. But like I was saying before, there's no possible way I can beat this cave right now, but I did have a backup plan for later. Because in this dinosaur-related video game, there is a food called rare flowers. And what's so great about these things is whenever you consume one, every single living specimen within a 5-mile radius gets a strong urge to delete you from existence. So if I can use their hatred against them and lure every single heathen from one side of the cave to the other with the rare flower effect, then I just might be able to get my hands on this artifact. So that was the plan. And back at base, the Kentro was 80% tamed. And after giving Reese's Feces a lifetime supply of his favorite food, alright buddy, you can wander wherever you would like, as long as it's in this cage. I had to wait about 2 to 3 business days for him to begin production. So I summoned in Lightning McQueen. That is not Lightning McQueen. Sorry for waterboarding you, buddy. And I swam all the way back over to Mr. Kentro, or Mrs. Kentro, more accurately, because when I arrived at her prison cell, she was 98.5% brainwashed. So I watched her sleep in the most non-creepy way possible, until a few minutes later, the Peacemaker was tamed. Now, before this tame, she had 20 points into health, which makes her secretly a level 75 in disguise. Actually terrible. But after the tame, she had 32 levels into health, which is still pretty bad, but 4.8k health. I mean, she is one of the Kentros of all time, but if I want these guys to actually survive, I was gonna need a higher level for her to breed with. So I checked to see if there were any better Kentros on the map. No, there were not, and that was gonna be a problem, but eventually another better one will spawn in, at least I hope so. So in the meantime, I decided to head over to the volcano to find some rare flowers and test my theory of getting the artifact of the Devourer. And when I arrived, I uncrioed Chewbacca Jr., who was having some doubts about wanting to be alive. Oh, Chewbacca, did your mother not teach you to not go cliff jumping without a parachute? And I spent the rest of day 41 exterminating every red cattail on this mountain by using a monkey's fist to collect as many rare flowers as possible. And on day 42, I now had 122 rare flowers firmly in my pocket. But before I went into the catacombs of doom, I spotted these level 10 Kentros who were getting noise complaints from the locals. So I recruited one of the local RGs to help dispose of the problem, because if these Kentros unfortunately pass away, then new ones will respawn and maybe I can find a higher level. But while they were having a civil war, I spotted this level 130 Doed who had a child. So I brought him over to the water and I began giving him some free swimming lessons, because I wanted to see if this young man would trade free swimming lessons for his only child. But then I realized that waterboarding the locals and potentially drowning them definitely breaks one of the 10 commandments. So unfortunately, I let him live. But anyways, the Kentro family was still alive somehow, and to fix that problem, I recruited another local RG to engage in some non-violent negotiations. And with the Kentro mother now in the afterlife, I claimed her level 10 child, which should remove both of them from the map and let another Kentro spawn in. But anyways, I continued the task of flying over to Carno Island, where I found a level 130 RG who was also a parent, and there was a Ceratow not that far away. I think you can see where I'm going with this. And after casually experiencing the heat death of the universe for some reason, the baby RG was nowhere to be found. Where did he go? And that was pretty unfortunate, but that wasn't even why I was here. I was here because it was time to use some flowers to steal an artifact. And my plan was to leave everything with Chewbacca here, while I lead all of the local degenerates astray to the other side of the cave. I have no idea if this is gonna work. Okay, so the plan kind of worked, but I wasn't able to eat the flowers while parachuting, so it kind of messed it up a little bit, and I'm gonna have to try again. So I made this helmet to protect Chewbacca's hairy skull, and I entered the cave once again, this time planning to lead all of them to the other side once and for all. I really hope this works. The plan worked perfectly, and now all the bad guys were over there on the poor people side of the cave. For some reason, Chewbacca decided to farm 3 tons of fiber while I was gone, but there were still some stragglers down there near the artifact, and that might be a problem. So on day 43, I farmed a little bit more thatch outside to make some more parachutes. And when I made it back in, I jumped down into the abyss yet again. And after speedrunning a silent reading session, I got a good view of 365 ways that I might die today, and this time around, I had to be super careful. So I jumped across to the upper ledge, which angered the entire southern hemisphere, and after a few seconds of playing Everybody Hates Juztify, the bats were still after me, and the rest of the guys were worshipping the rock. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but it was pretty close. And when I decided to take a peek at this red supply drop, well, that was the end of that. But when I respawned, I realized that I didn't have enough cryo space for Chewbacca, so I left this baby Kintro unattended, and I jumped down onto this glowing mushroom. But then I realized that I probably needed some backup, and then I re-cryoed the baby Kintro, because after jumping back down into the void yet again, I recruited this baby Kintro to be a distraction. And the plan worked. Almost. Because as I ARK Survival Ascended into the pit of doom, I did manage to grab the artifact. But this area was far from empty, and despite being assaulted in 47 different ways, I was still alive to grapple out. And that would have worked, except I grappled onto the bat. So there I was, attached to a bat, being dangled over the mouths of some hungry cretins. And when I finally broke free, well, this happened. Well, that could have gone better. But on the bright side, my bag was up on the wall, and I think that is a pretty good spot. The only problem is that I forgot to make more sleeping bags. So I respawned on the other side of the map on Herbivore Island, made another set of flak, made some grappling hooks, and ran out of metal. So I can't really afford to make any pants. And then I also realized that I don't have enough chitin to make another RG saddle. Good times. I have no tames at my entire base with a saddle that I can use to ride. So I made another pickaxe to get some thatch for a bed. What is happening? And set sail on the SS Fish Avoider. Yeah, this is gonna take a while. Bro, imagine you're like a Viking back in the day, right? And you look outside your longboat, and this man is pulling up. It took about 10 minutes just to sail up the right side of the map. But once I arrived at Carno Island, I sprinted even faster than normal, thanks to me being a little bit more aerodynamic today. And I was able to make my way all the way down to these red shrooms without much of a problem. Oh wait, I think I see it. So I did some rock climbing related activities, bit of hardcore parkour, and grabbed my stuff, while the locals were distracted having a dance battle. When I made it out of the Carno Island cave, day 43 was already coming to an end. But on day 44, before I left the island, I wanted some more chitin so I could make some more tripwire narcotic shots. And luckily, there was a scorpion nearby, so I convinced him to donate to a local charity. The charity was me, by the way. And now that I had the artifact of the Devourer, I can now summon Papapithecus. But I wasn't ready just yet, because I still needed a male Kintro to breed with the Peacemaker to make an army of pacifists. So I checked on the map to see if there were any good level Kintros nearby, and the best one that I could find was only level 105. For some reason, the island just always spawns really low levels of everything, and I really needed a better Kintro to get a better health stat, because Papapithecus has 180k health. However, the only way for more Kintros to actually spawn in is for the bad ones to be removed from the server. And the only non-violent and purely ethical way of me doing that is by letting someone else do it. And you'll see how I'm gonna do that soon. Because over back at my base, Racy's Feces was putting in overtime. Unpaid overtime, to be more precise. But now that I had some locally produced fertilizer, I could now begin my true calling of becoming a humble farmer right after I farm some more seeds. It's not much, but it's honest work. As the sun set on day 44, I now had a fully functioning farm, locally fertilized by Racy's Feces, and the only thing left to do now was to grab some metal to make a shovel. Because in ARK Survival Ascended, if you use the metal shovel to till your crops like this, it increases their harvest production by like 20 to 30%. And now the only thing left to do was to wait. So on day 45, I decided to start preparing to actually craft the veggie cakes for my Kentro army. I was gonna need sap and giant bee honey. So I unlocked the tree sap tab and the stone tree platform because it's the cheapest one in terms of cementing paste, experienced the cold death of the universe in my living room, and came up with a plan of how to get a good Kentro to spawn in while multitasking and also farming enough chitin to make 700 cementing paste. So I summoned Lightning McQueen, began swimming over, began flying over, I guess, and began to spectate as the Kentros were removed from the premises. But after witnessing a couple tragedies, I realized that I might be able to solve both of my problems at the same time, because scorpions have a lot of chitin. Nice. 69 chitin in this economy? This was a game changer. So I tracked every single chitin-wearing citizen on the entire ARK and Kentro across time itself. And I spent the rest of day 45 ethically convincing some other citizens to remove these peasants from the server. It was now day 47, and at this point, I just spent almost 2 hours searching for a good level male Kentro that has more health than a grain of grass. Did I just say a grain of grass? And I was getting extremely desperate. So after sending another low level Kentro to the Shadow Realm, by ethical means, I checked my tracker, and I found a level 145 Kentro with 23 points into health. And that is still pretty trash, but at this point, I'm just gonna take whatever I can get. So after McClucken flapped his wings as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast, I spoiled some meat on the way home to save some time, and when I finally arrived, there was a corpse in my living room. Let's get rid of that. But I had enough spoiled meat to craft enough narcotics to cure even the most severe cases of insomnia. And now, I just needed some stone and some metal to make extra flak armor and cementing paste. But since McClucken has all of his points into health, his max deadlift is only 500 nanograms. And since I would like to get more than 5 metal today, I brought out Hulk Hogan, put some levels into stamina, and pretty much all of them into his weight. We're making this man a bodybuilder. Because after reading some lore about hyenas and their non-existent dental hygiene, it was time to attend a Metallica concert. On day 48, Hulk Hogan had over 2 tons of metal. I'm not really sure where he keeps it, but after flying home at -2 miles per hour, I got all the metal smelting, and I spent about 5 minutes mining some stone around base. It takes 8 stone per 1 cementing paste, which is kind of insane, but I was able to make 150 cementing paste, and I turned all of it into tripwire narcotic traps. I visited hypothermia land in the process, and then accidentally spawned on the other side of the planet. But it was time, because I finally had enough narcotic traps to tame the level 140 male Kentro that I found after searching for 5 days. But before I set out for the tame, I wanted to see if there was anything better on the map. And while there was a good amount of Kentros, these guys were next level bad. And there was even one with 0 points into his health somehow. How are you alive? But after 5 minutes of McClucken Jr., not very fast, but furiously flapping his wings, I arrived at the taming site, placed down my trap, lured Mr. Kentro into his new home, or I at least tried to. What are you doing? But once he was safely inside, I engaged in some casual chemical warfare. And as he was getting closer to the best sleep of his life, I checked around to see if there were any acupuncture connoisseurs in my area. There was a level 110, but I witnessed him perish in real time. Oh, rip that guy. But thankfully, there was another high-level scorpion close by. So I flew on over, airlifted that man straight to his new roommate, and watched as they began having a play date. The scorpion was doing some pretty good torpor, but his health was getting kinda low, and it wasn't gonna be enough to knock out the Kentro before this play date came to an end. So I tracked down yet another scorpion for a second medical opinion, snatched that man straight off the grass, and on the way back, I kind of realized that I brought the wrong RG. This was Hulk Hogan, and his health is non-existent. Oh, I'm about to die. But thankfully, I got the scorpion in the trap right before I was on 11 health. And also, since this is the wrong RG, there's no raw meat in his inventory. This was also going to be a problem because I needed meat to heal up so I could grab the scorpion before he actually kills the Kentro. And in this challenge, finding a single morsel of food, it's pretty hard to come by. So I decided to stay out of render distance, hoping that the scorpion will not knock out the Kentro while I'm not there. And the mission now was to just find some food. Any food, to be honest.
My name is Jennifer, and I'm addicted to eating mattresses.
But after not finding a single morsel of food, I realized that too much time has passed and I should probably go check on the scorpion. But as I headed over, my suspicions would soon come true, because when I entered render distance, I saw this. Well, guys, I'm gonna go to bed. Yeah, I logged off for the night, but I guess that I wasn't actually far enough away to be out of render distance, and now I really wanted to get revenge. But if I did that, I would fail this challenge. So I outsourced my revenge to this Ankylo hitman, and after witnessing a war crime that I was totally not responsible for, I needed to find another good Kentro, which is bad enough, but I also needed to make another 30 tripwire narcotic traps. Yeah, I'll see you guys in 2 hours. Actually, I lied, because I just realized that it's Sunday. And yes, I did forget about the Sabbath day on day 42 and day 35. Okay, so it probably happens again later in the video as well. I completely forgot. All right, all the other commandments were followed. But anyways, as I was saying, it was time to find another Kentro. And I'll see you guys in 2 hours. It was now day 51, and over 35 Kentros have been ethically removed from the server. None by me, of course. But with the keratin that they left me in their inheritance, I wasted no time and made some more tripwire narcotic traps, because over by the mountain was this very healthy gentleman. Now, this man had 28 points into his health, which was actually really high for a level 135, and it only took 2 hours of my life, but it's better late than never. So I flew over, slowly, set up my new trap house, and tried to convert him to the trap lifestyle. But I would like to put the emphasis on the word tried, because this dude was making my job as difficult as possible. Every time I brought this dude to the ramp, he would just stop and stare at my tail feathers. And the moment that I inch forward and his left toe touches the ramp, the brother does a 180 and runs to his mother. Okay, really? I'm not sure why his pathfinding was so amazing, like the first time that ever works in this game, but eventually his willpower faded, and just like everyone else, he fell into my trap. And with my test subject inside, I began reading some of my best-selling bedtime stories directly into his eardrums. And after the 20th dose of some questionably green toxic fumes, he was struggling to keep them eyes open. Alright, it's time to finish him off. We've already seen this whole scorpion thing 3 times now, so I won't describe every detail, but this time I actually used the correct RG, survived being stabbed 83 times by a psychopath, and watched as nap time commenced. Yeah, we'll skip ahead a few minutes. A few minutes later, the Kentro was down. And this time I actually managed to get him away from my Kentro before he dropped the taming effectiveness. I think he did get 1 hit in, actually. But after watching him get eviscerated by Spike Wazowski, I hired a private chef to cook up some of his favorite food. A plate of 300 purple berries. And now I just have to wait 45 minutes. Good times. But at this point, it was already day 52, and I still haven't defeated a single one of the 4 bosses, meaning I'm still breaking the first commandment of there being a false god. I need to get this Kentro as soon as possible so I can take them down. And while I was waiting on the tame, I tended to the veggie cake farm, and for some reason, ever since that last update, I'm still getting 100 FPS, but I keep having these little lag spikes or stutters or whatever that is, so I'm sorry about that if you notice it. I don't really know how to fix it. It doesn't happen that often though. But anyways, I still had a bit of time to kill before I could breed the Kentros because one of them was still unconscious. So in the meantime, I used pretty much all of the metal and most of the cementing paste that I had from this entire run to make 2 tree sap taps. Because sap is one of the main ingredients to make sweet vegetable cakes, which can heal the Kentros during the boss fight, and I really needed to get these tree sap taps going so they'll be ready for when I have the other ingredients. They kinda take a while. And while I was here, I was about to loot these beehives for some honey, because that's another core ingredient for these sweet vegetable cakes. But then I realized something. Taking this bee's honey without his consent would be considered stealing, and that would break the 8th commandment. So I'm probably gonna have to tame one of these guys, unfortunately. On day 53, I arrived back at base, and the Kintro was about halfway tamed, but it still had about 30 minutes to go, so I spent the entire day making some refining forges because the metal is taking forever, farming a bit more cementing paste, and went AFK. But on day 54, after my game crashed, Vlad the Impaler was tamed. And he won't be impaling anyone today, but I did convince him to propose to his future wife, Mrs. Peacemaker. Because with 38 total points into his health, it's still not great, but I think we just might pull this off. For reference, I usually go 40 points into something before I decide to breed for mutations, but in this run, I don't really think I can be very picky. I needed to make sure that everything was ready for the boss fight, and there was still one task left to complete. I needed some honey. And it wasn't gonna be easy. Because after I attended a college seminar on how to repel bugs, I harvested my crops, crafted 2 buckets of bug fixes, and came up with a plan. Queen bees in this game can be found inside of their beehives, and they don't ever come out unless you brutally destroy their entire house, which would probably be breaking at least one of the 10 commandments, I'd imagine, but they can rarely sometimes spawn outside of the hive. So I tried using the dino tracker to see if any of them were already outside, but every single person that I visited didn't realize that quarantine was already over. Can you guys please just come outside? All I want to do is shove a rare flower into your mouth. Things were not looking great, and when I recruited a local commandment breaker to do my dirty work, well, he was only dealing damage to me, and that wasn't working either. I even tried giving Harambe's estranged cousin a chance to prove his worth, but that wasn't working either, and instead of a queen bee, a heathen popped out. Oh, no. So there I was, claws being lodged into my forehead, wondering where it all went wrong. But then, out of nowhere, McCluckin came to the rescue. And somehow I actually survived that, but Harambe's step-cousin did not. Anyways, these bees were severely antisocial, and I even tried eating a rare flower which caused every man to ever live to attempt to end my life, but the queen bees did not care, and they were still refusing to leave their home. Kinda relatable, to be honest. And my only chance now was to find one that was outside of her hive. I feel like that happens pretty often because I see it all the time, but I haven't seen one yet in this playthrough. So I checked the redwoods, and I started checking the other nests around the green off. One was even inside the wall at one point, and after a somewhat significant amount of time had passed, it was day 55, and over 30 beehives had been searched with not one single queen bee. At this point, I was about to give up and be cakeless for all eternity, but I decided to track a couple more, and the second one that I found back in the redwoods was this. Oh, finally, the bee movie has commenced. And after chugging an entire bucket of bug repellent, I scared the lady dude, got assaulted by her goons, and almost got sent to the gulag. But after leaving Render to lose aggro, I tried a second time. Normally, you tame these guys with ghillie armor, and without it, you really have to sneak up on these guys. And despite me crip walking over in my clanky shining armor, she still alerted the authorities. But even though her test subjects spawned in, it still gave me the tame. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you ace the spelling bee. Okay, where is McCluckin? That was close, because if I couldn't tame a bee without ghillie, well, I'm not allowed to slay penguins for organic polymer, so I'm not allowed to make ghillie. And at that point, the run might have been over, but we did it. And if you've never tamed one of these bees before, you basically just trade rare flowers in their inventory for honey, at the small price of being physically attacked every time you check their inventory. And now that the crops, the beehive, and the tree sap tab from earlier are all slowly generating veggie cakes for the Kintros, well, with no mating outside of marriage and no cheating on your lover allowed in this challenge, these 2 Kintros are my only breeders in this entire family. And therefore, making a boss army is going to take a lot longer than it normally would. And because of that, if I mess this up and we lose to Dinopithecus in the boss fight, well, there's not going to be enough time to make another army and finish this challenge. It was now or never, and I would prefer now. So I put on my very best suit, and now, ladies and gentle sores, I present to you the spikiest wedding ceremony of all time. The Kentros just got married only 9 days ago, and they already have 40 children. I named all of these Kentros in the front of the base Boss because they have the good health stat, and the ones in the back of the base, they're named Freeloader because they have the bad health stat. And the only thing preventing me from evicting them from life is the commandment, thou shalt not murder. But that's why we created the neglect zone over there. So after going on one last berry run, I needed to find a way to level Mr. Kentro's health to about 40k. And since I'm not allowed to kill things to do this, that only leaves me with 2 options for XP. Option number 1 was to stand here for 84 years. And option number 2 was to make some cryopods. I had all the polymer that I needed, but I didn't have oil. Never mind. I have found some oil. Thanks, bro. But I also didn't have crystal. And every time I have to fly over to this mountain, it takes about 20 minutes off of my life, literally. But a few thousand wing flaps later, I was able to make a resounding 16 cryopods, which brings our total to 20. So back at my humble abode, I started to cryo my spiky children. And after consulting Google to see how much XP a dino gains while inside a cryopod, well, it turns out it's not very much. 0.639 XP per minute? Okay, please tell me that's more than it sounds like. And 0.639 XP per minute was just as bad as it sounds. Because for 40 levels, it would take around 30 days. Is it too late to do a different challenge? But it was now day 65. And if I were to wait around for 30 days, I would basically just cut that out of the video anyway. So it's not really that difficult. It's just a waste of my time. And to speed up the process without doing anything gameplay related, just time saving related, I installed this crazy potion mod. No, actually, that's the name of the mod. Now, there's a lot of potions here, and most of them blatantly defy the 10 commandments. But I only plan on using 2 of these things, the healing potion and the dino XP potion. Because since I'm not allowed to kill anything in this challenge, this is really the only way of getting levels unless I want to wait until I'm retirement age. But don't worry, it's only to level them up and then to heal them up to their level. I'm not going to use any of the healing potions during the boss fights, and I'm not going to use any of the other potions in this mod at all. So with that being said, it's time to get some XP. I needed some rare flowers, some raw meat of unknown origin, and some meho berries to make the potion. And the berries and the flowers were the easiest to get. But the rare flowers did require me to fly halfway across the solar system, which wasted another 20 minutes of my life. And at one point, Chewbacca decided to go cliff diving without a parachute. But after the rare flowers were secure, I could finally make the potion station. Well, after getting dunked on by LeBronto James. But everything was ready. And on day 66, I lined up all 19 Kentros because the last slot is going to be something else, and they already had 12 levels from the cryopods each. But after a few more potions into each Kentro, we made it just shy of 40k health on most of the Kentros. And now they just needed to heal up. So I chopped down some trees and made another feeding trough, away from the Kentros in the neglect zone, disposed of this corpse that was in my front yard, and paid Chewbacca about $3 an hour to farm some berries. And now I just needed some meat. So after witnessing 1,000 pteranodons all spawn in the same location, what in tarnation? Why are there so many? I spent another entire day farming meat. Yeah, this is getting kinda old. But the Kentros were ready for battle. Because a few potion-related activities later, they were all looking pretty healthy. And most of them were full on food, but for some reason, a few of them only had like 6k out of 30,000. Like, bro, how are you bad at eating? And now there was only one thing left before I can fight Mr. Monkey Man. Because I have 19 Kentros, and you can bring 20 dinos into the boss fight. But for the last dino, I needed something that I could ride so I wasn't just standing there ready to be one-shot by Papapithecus. And normally, I would go with the standard duty, but I've done that in most of my other challenges, and it's kind of boring. So for this challenge, I did some more research, and I discovered something brand new, the Dinotherium. Unlike the Yudi, who is a degenerate, this man is a passive tame. But I could always punch him 8,158 times in the nose to knock him out, with a 100% chance of death, by the way. Great odds right there. But anyways, these guys are severe alcoholics, and the only way to tame them is by using beer. So I hired Chewbacca to be the new CEO of my brewery, crafted an empty jar, and began fermenting some berries. And I've never actually tamed one of these guys before, but it is a really interesting method, and you'll see that soon. Because when I checked to see how many Dinotheriums were on the map, well, out of 10,000 total citizens of the ARK, 2 of them defied the laws of creation, another 0 health stat, one of them guys just evaporated in front of my eyes, and all the others belong in a landfill. Dude, all of them suck. I'm probably gonna have to get a lower level than I wanted to, but before we start the tame, some of you might be wondering what these gentlemen are capable of. Well, the males provide a damage boost to the whole team, which would be pretty great if it wasn't interfering with my life as a pacifist. But the females provide damage resistance, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. And yes, the Utis actually are better, but I've never tamed one of these guys before. And since they're a passive tame, it kind of fits with this challenge, and I just wanted to try them out. So while I was farming berries while waiting 5 centuries for a single jar of beer to ferment, I may have instead farmed Hannah Brontana's tailbone, which caused her to Naruto run faster than Usain Bolt and step on 1,000 sentient Lego pieces. Oh no, I'm sorry, bro, stop! At one point, she used her tail as a battering ram and sent like 10 Kentros into orbit, but then 3 seconds later, she developed amnesia, forgot that she hated me, and then we became best friends again. She took 2,000 damage from stepping on y'all? I'm proud of you, son. But at this point, the beer still wasn't brewed. Yeah, it takes like, I think 2 hours per. So I shifted my focus on getting some fur armor for the boss arena, because it's located over at the Blue Obelisk in the land of hypothermia, meaning it be cold. And I did have 120 pelt, which was just enough for a shirt and some gloves. Only a shirt and gloves. But after some aquatic related activities, I witnessed yet another Titanosaur get booted from the Heaven lobby, attended an Eskimo's funeral, attended my own funeral, and witnessed not 2, but 10 pelt-wearing Neanderthals perish from the server. And I now had 200 pelt, which weighs 200 pounds, a whole lot of meat, and a walking speed of negative 30 miles per hour. So I summoned Lightning McQueen, who has a little bit more weight than I do, returned to my humble abode, and crafted a full set of fur armor. I'm finally wearing pants. And there was also a singular beer liquid in this barrel. So I poured it into a jar, and it was time to tame Mr. Elephant. But I also noticed that they added these Lost Colony ARK skins to the game in the last update. So I equipped my fur suit. Wait, that's not what I meant. I equipped my fur armor, and I equipped some skins. Now, this entire set looked absolutely amazing, but it also looked exactly like Darth Vader. And since Darth Vader is a pretty bad guy, I didn't want to take any chances of accidentally failing this challenge. So I let Chewbacca Jr. take the fall. But moving along, it was now time to tame a roided out elephant. When I arrived over in his hometown, I found Mr. Elephant waging warfare against the locals. And I also got mugged by a pack of commandment breakers. But I cleared the area and began the tame. I've never done this before, so I had to look it up. And TLDR, you stand right in front of this man, stare into his soul, and from there, you're gonna engage in a dance battle to the death, where you have to look for 3 positive signals from an elephant in a row. It's just like dating, but with an elephant that communicates through sign language, and also if you get rejected, you die. Just like high school. But anyways, as you can see, she's been doing some Fortnite emotes. And after seeing 3 of the positive signals that I was talking about, I ran up to her, almost got deleted, and calmed her down by offering an alcoholic beverage. And just like that, Steve Jobs was tamed. And if you're wondering why she's named Steve Jobs, well, I asked my friend, if you had a pet elephant, what would you name him? Bro looked at me with a straight face, and he said Steve Jobs. Yeah, I don't know either. But anyways, after flying through Air Pteranodon, I made several XP potions to level up Steve Jobs, crafted her a saddle, and I wanted to test out her ability. The right trigger base attack pretty much just farms berries because I can't use it for anything else, and the left trigger attack does something that would probably get me 34 years for 3rd degree murder, and both of those are kind of useless. But the C attack is her rally cry, where she screams up into the sky and people get defensive. And at this point, now that I had a giant elephant, it was time to fight a giant monkey. So I cryoed the Kentro army while LeBronto James' entire extended family walked through my living room, and there was now only one thing left to do. I needed some med brews. So I made a cooking pot, and while they were cooking up, I spent some time trying to convince LeBronto James that I was his child. Bro was flabbergasted. But after 71 days, I now had 17 med brews, and now it was time for what I've been putting off. This entire run has been one of the journeys of all time. But with 19 Kentros and a female elephant that was named Steve Jobs for some reason, it was time to see if you could beat a boss in ARK without breaking a single one of the 10 commandments. But if Papapithecus and his goons decide to attack me, and maybe he stubs his toe and perishes in the process, well, that's his problem. It was a close fight, and the Kentros did well, but in the end, everyone was dead, except Papapithecus, a female elephant named Steve Jobs, and Juztify. At this point, I thought it was over, so I tried to run away and escape the Matrix when I noticed something. There was one single Kentra that didn't make it over to the arena. In fact, he still had about 25k health, and with Papapithecus being pretty low on health himself, it was looking bad, but it wasn't over. We still had a chance. And just like that, everything was gone. And with it already being day 70, there was no way that I would have enough time to rebuild it all. Things were looking pretty bad, but I wasn't ready to give up just yet. Because I made a backup save right before that fight just in case something bad happened. And now that it did, I know exactly what went wrong and how we can fix it. Now, yes, this is me reloading a save, so technically I already failed the challenge. But I want to see if this still is possible. So we're going to keep going, and we're going to pretend like that didn't happen. Because this time around, I'm actually going to bring some veggie cakes. And I didn't want to do this yet, because this might mean that I won't have enough veggie cakes when the dragon fight comes around. Okay, why are there like 45 vegans inside my bedroom? But that doesn't matter if we can't even beat this guy first. I'll worry about that later. Because veggie cakes require sap, honey, veggies, and berries. And we prepared for the sap earlier by placing these tree sap tap in the redwoods, but I don't have a cliff platform to actually get them because of inflation. So I tried to use my skydiving expertise to jump onto the pipe, and that didn't work. But then I remembered that I literally have grapple, so I grappled up, got about 20 sap from each tap, and that's not very much, but I do have some at base that I collected earlier. And speaking of base, I farmed some Chewbacca. Did I just say? Okay, I farmed some Mayho berries using Darth Chewbacca. Bro looks like he joined the dark side, by the way. Consensually stole some honey from my pet bees, made 2 more water jars, and began cooking.
Someone cooked here.
This might take a while. All of my Kentros have one single veggie cake, except for Steve Jobs, because I can't afford to feed her. We're on a tight budget. But each veggie cake heals 10% of their health. And while that's not much, I also had a new strategy to try and avoid the giant rocks, because they don't do reflection damage. It's gonna be very close, but I think we might just pull this off. The false god in monkey form has been defeated, slain by himself, because all the damage he took was from his own attacks. But now with some element, his giant forehead, and a few casualties along the way, we just proved that it is 100% possible to take down a boss without breaking any of the 10 commandments. Barely, to be fair, and only based on the rules I said in this video, but it wasn't over, because even though taking down the Megapithecus was obeying the first commandment, the Overseer was still breaking it, being a false god to all of the ARK. And the next boss that I needed to take down was the hardest one on this entire map, and one of the hardest in the game, and his name is Doug. And it wasn't gonna be easy, because to summon Doug, I needed 4 artifacts, located in the hard underwater cave, the impossible snow cave, and the dreaded swamp cave. And I do have a plan for beating each of these caves, without killing of course. But these caves are so ridiculously overtuned that I'm not sure if it's gonna work. But anyways, when I made it back to my herbivore paradise, the Bronto apocalypse was happening in real time. But it was now day 74, and my army really needed to heal up from all of that monkey business. So I kept them inside of their cryopods, that way they can still heal without causing world hunger. And after placing down the flag that I got from defeating a false god, well, it was already day 74, and I really needed to get moving on these artifacts to take down Doug if I wanted to finish by day 100. So I leveled the health of some freeloaders in my backyard, gave them a job application with a 100% tax rate, tried to find my RG. Where is McCluckin? Oh, dude, these Brontos are so annoying. Out of all 4 of the caves that I needed to fight Doug, the easy snow cave was the only one reasonable enough for me to not have to do some insane strategy. So after taking 5 business days to fly over, I made a sleeping bag, and with a mix of some bolas, grapples, and kintros, sounds like a low-budget 90s action movie, I slowly entered the cave. It didn't take long for me to hear the sounds of several degenerates in the vicinity, and while I would like to go a bit further, this middle area is the only spot that kintros can fit. So I summoned a freeloader, ex-freeloader, and the plan was simple. I was gonna kite all of these Neanderthals out of their homes to my new employee's office, where his only job is to stand very still, no matter what happens. The residents of the first area were clearly stuck, and I intend to keep it that way. So I decided to go to this backside and grapple straight up to the artifact. But that's where things got a bit tricky, because right next to the artifact of the Skylord was Batman himself, and he was level 145. So I angered that man by looking at him, jumped over the pit of doom, and began running for my life. And the plan was working as intended, but my new employee was doing a solid 8 damage, because the bat has very low drag weight and Kintro's reflect damage is based on how fat their adversaries are. So I filed an HR claim for fat-phobic discrimination and left that man to fend for himself, because with the bat out of the way, I grappled back up to the artifact and I saw this. These 2 degenerates were both stuck behind the artifact, but the moment that I grabbed it, they would be free. And I think we all know how they're going to use that freedom. So I was trying to scout it out a bit, but apparently he wasn't actually stuck. And since I was already here, I tried to grab the artifact and make my escape. But then this happened. Well, that's not good. If you're confused on what just happened, the bat knocked me down mid-grapple, and while he was in the process of death, he chose Juztify as his last meal. Basically, my stuff's in a bag and not a body, so I can't just grapple it out. And if you aren't aware, that's a death barrier that deals 500,000 damage. But I had pretty much everything in that bag, and I had to get it back. So I made another crossbow, some more grapples, tamed another dolphin because Lightning McQueen was indisposed at the moment, and grappled up to the cave, where I experienced the cold death of the universe again. The plan was simple, but it wasn't easy. Because first of all, I have to dispose of several subspecies of barbarian. And after leading this flying rodent out of the cave, I tried to get him to follow Hulk Hogan. But that man had a severe case of homesickness. What are you doing? So I just left him outside of the cave since he didn't seem like he was gonna hurt my RG, headed back to the place of my death, and grappled up onto the ceiling right above the bag. The plan was to lower myself down, slowly, into the pit of literal death. What are you looking at? But since the death barrier is higher up than the actual spikes down there was almost zero margin of error. And a few seconds later, I took 500,000 damage. Oh, dude. I wasn't really sure if this was even possible, to be honest, but after contracting mega rabies and then trying to wave to a shark but taking a dump next to him instead, and headed back to the scene of the crime. Now, for some reason, Spider-Man decided that today was the day he was gonna lose 500 pounds and actually fit through a doorway. So I grappled onto the ceiling to save myself, which did work, but now I have no more grapples. We'll be right back. This time around, the bats have decided to phase through a wall. Not gonna question that one. So with no immediate threats, I headed back into the pit of suffering, where I grappled yet again onto the ceiling, and this time, the angle was perfect. Because after a little bit of grapple-related activities, I slowly lowered myself until I saw the pop-up. If I moved even an inch, I would instantly die. But I spammed the Y button on my controller and got out of there. But before I could even celebrate, I saw damage numbers in the distance. What is it now? Because it turns out that the wall bats from earlier were well versed in ancient war tactics. What? And they used solid ice to launch a Trojan horse operation against McClucken. I'm not even gonna question that, but thankfully we were able to escape, and the artifact of the Skylord has been secured. And now all that was left was the artifact of the immune, the strong, and the artifact of the cunning. But these 3 artifacts were some of the hardest in the entire game. And the swamp cave for the immune is borderline impossible without killing anything, because there's an infinite amount of heathens in every corner of that cave. Not to mention the fumes that assault my lungs. But that's a problem for future Juztify to deal with, because the present Juztify has 200 cementing paste, which is just enough to craft... do you mind, sir? 23 grappling hooks, which was nowhere close to enough. But after going on a heavy metal world tour, Well, I still didn't have enough, because for the snow cave, I need a bare minimum of 100 grapples. Yes, my plan is to literally not touch the ground, and no, I'm not sure if that's gonna work, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Because on day 77, I made it back from my metal expedition, but the metal was gonna take a while to cook, so there's been a slight change of plans. I was gonna do the hard underwater cave first, and then come back to this. So I made yet another sleeping bag and an extra scuba tank, summoned in a dolphin named Lightning McQueen, who was still fasting per usual, and for this entire run, I've been pumping nothing but movement speed into this guy just to prepare for this moment. Because the only way to avoid everything in this cave is pure speed. But speed on its own wouldn't be enough, because as I entered this cave, I was on the lookout for Moses, Tusos, and electroshock therapists. And not even 10 seconds in, I found one. Luckily, I swam to the top of the cave where I managed to lose them by pure speed. And since everything that was overspawning was over at the bottom and nothing was chasing me, I made it over to the final tunnel and ARK Survival Ascended into the depths. So that went a lot better than I expected. I was prepared to die like 8 times and tame another 8 dolphins, but Lightning McQueen with 200 speed is kind of busted. And with both water caves out of the way, Lightning McQueen's job in this challenge is now complete as soon as he takes me home. And with the artifact of the cunning now secured, I continued to craft some more grapples, bringing our total to 70 grapples. But I still needed more metal to make the last 30. So in the meantime, I checked the dino tracker to see what type of tames I could ethically recruit to my tribe, and I found this level 115 Dinopithecus just chilling on the map. I wanted to tame that guy. So I grabbed some of Chewbacca's famous moonshine, thank you Darth Vader, and I low-key had my recording paused again. But all that happened was I fed him 1 pint of beer, and all that was left was the final chug. So I stared directly into that man's soul as he wiggled his ears, shook his trunk, and that was my cue. So I sprinted over, poured some isopropyl alcohol down his nostril, and just like that, the CEO of Android was tamed. Wait, what even is that guy? Andy Rubin. And back at my humble abode, El Chapo officiated a wedding between 2 rival tech CEOs. The main reason I tamed this guy and forced him to marry Steve Jobs was to breed another female with a better health stat for the dragon. And while they were doing some post-marital activities and a baby Bronto just walked through the fire and flames, I finished crafting and I now had 101 grappling hooks. And 3 minutes later, a baby Dinopithecus was born. And he had the good health in melee, but he was also a male, so it wasn't very helpful for me. I also tried to feed the dude, but all the food got ravaged by several hordes of freeloaders. But after the great famine of Herbivore Island, it was time to use all 101 grapples, which I hope is enough, because the hard snow cave and the artifact of the strong await. And this is probably the hardest cave on this map, if not this entire game. So I hired 18 freeloaders for a job where their only task was to not ask questions and stand still. And after a quick wardrobe change, I arrived at the North Pole, where I acquired some pelt by pure ethical means, of course. That took 15 minutes, by the way. And I repaired my armor using the organic smithy known as McClucken. Also, I may have forgot my grapples. We'll be right back. On day 80, I was finally ready. But the grapples weighed 10 pounds per stack, and the sleeping bags weighed 30. So I'm physically unable to move right now. So I placed 2 sleeping bags down outside the cave, put 3 inside of McClucken's wherever he keeps them, because after admiring some rocks that failed physics class, this is ARK Ascended, by the way, I was now ready for something. And that something is either going to be pure cinema or pure depression. We're about to find out which. Because first of all, I equipped several freeloaders onto my hotbar. I then slowly approached the first cavern of the cave, where there was a level 165 polar bear, a yeti with a casual 10k health, another 265 polar bear, a 156 perlovia, and another 265 polar bear. But the main problem with this cave is that some of the tunnels are too short and too tight to grapple to the ceiling, because you'd just be hanging there way too low like a piranha for degenerates. But I did have a way to get past that as well. I just had to get there. And since the entire family lineage of degenerates are right at my feet right now, I can't afford to mess up. Now, normally in this cave, you would go straight. But since I'm doing the Spider-Man challenge, we are gonna go to the left. So I used a freeloader as a distraction so I could get away, and it almost worked until it didn't. No, you're supposed to eat that guy, not me. And since it was too late to turn back, it was time for a speed run. So I lodged and delodged my grappling hook from the ceiling at world record speed until I came across the Wolf of Wall Street, who was bathing with the salmon. I tried to grapple over this ledge, hoping that he would chase me and fall down, but instead he just decided to take an ice bath at negative 50 degrees Celsius, so I continued on. And this is where things get sketchy, because as you can see to my left, there are Purlovias. Lots of Purlovias. But I didn't need to go that way, because there was a shortcut up ahead. The only downside was that there were several subspecies of polar bear ready to decapitate me. So I timed my grapple while they were running away for some reason, and I made it to the next area. And this is where things become medium difficulty. Yes, that was the easiest part of the game. Because in this next area, there's a tunnel that's so short you can't grapple to the ceiling, and it likes to spawn every single member of the Mafia inside. Luckily, no one was paying me attention in here though, so I headed down into that tunnel I was just talking about. And I placed down a sleeping bag as a checkpoint, because as I scoped out the next area, I found some hypothermia enthusiasts and some murder enthusiasts as well. Clearly, trying to grapple above those guys would not work, and I didn't even have a storage box for my stuff in case I died trying. So I gave one of the several useless members of society in my inventory a purpose in life. You, sir, are now a storage box, and I'm gonna use one of the several other useless members of our society as a willing distraction. Don't worry, I pay him pretty well. But this is completely experimental, and I'm not sure if it's gonna work. That almost worked, but the Kintro didn't go anywhere near as far as I thought he would. And to make matters worse, when I tried to take a damage assessment, this happened. The Mafia was now after me, so I thought on my feet and gave them an early Christmas present. And this time, the distraction actually worked, but one dire wolf made it through. And it didn't seem too bad at first, but I was over here, stuck next to a crystal, watching a degenerate nibble on my full-time storage box. He was doing a lot of damage, and it might get pretty bad. So to prevent any storage box-related casualties, I summoned another lowlife, and a few seconds later, the crisis was averted. But that didn't help much, because I still had the issue of several hordes of delinquents to deal with. So I tried a different method, which involved throwing another freeloader into the horde, but he got deleted. I was gonna have to get closer on foot once again, and I'm sure you can all guess what happened. But somehow, I actually survived that, because the AI pathfinding in this game prevents these heathens from taking a bath. They were dead set on guarding their little part of the door and preventing me from achieving my goal. And I tried luring them into the ice bath using a flash frozen Juztify, and that almost worked, but unfortunately, I think that's the best we're gonna get in terms of the water. Also, I'm running out of freeloaders over here, so I really need to get past this area. And this time, I tried grappling over the horde, but like most of my plans, it ended in disappointment. Yeah, that's not good. The entire purpose of me throwing the Kintros and running through that cavern was to get the Purlovias out of the ground. But for some reason, those brothers were grounded. And all of my grapples and a lot of my extra gear and Kintros were on my body as well. And if I can't get them back soon, that's gonna be pretty bad, and I might fail the challenge. I really had to act fast. So I turned all of my remaining resources into some backup grappling hooks, grabbed the remaining freeloaders, useless members of our society, peasants, and kindergarten dropouts to put inside a spherical Pokeball, and I realized that I needed some fur armor. So I tried to force respawn by standing inside the fire. How am I freezing to death while I'm standing in fire? But hypothermia land got me the same result. And after spawning in over at the snow cave, I grabbed my armor and spent most of day 81 flying all the way across the map just to make it home to a baby Dinotherium that was in the afterlife. All the freeloaders ate all of the berries. But low-key, he's more useful to me this way. But even with some pelt that came from a baby, I could only make a single set of pantalones. So I grabbed the remaining resources needed to make some fur armor, made another trip back to Antarctica, harvested some pelt from some willing volunteers, and finally, by the end of day 81, I had a full set of fur armor once again, and it was now time to get my stuff back. And just like that, I now had everything back after 2 real-life hours of pure suffering. Look at all them freeloaders. And now that I had my stuff back, it was time to continue on through the cave. But up ahead, the tunnel was blocked by a monkey man who has already deleted me 8 times today.
Why won't you die?
But after guest starring in the Jukes of Hazard and breaking some monk-like kneecaps, I made it to the large cavern, where I almost got RKO'd by a rocket-propelled Prolovia. Oh, not today. But luckily for me, I have grapples and he doesn't. And after a few more zipline related activities, I know what you are. Well, the next part of the cave is just as bad as that tunnel section where I died earlier. And because of how many times I've died, I only have 2 sleeping bags left. Wait, did I die over 20 times? I was gonna have to be perfect for the rest of this cave, with no mistakes. And since I was going to die in about 2 seconds from hypothermia, I was gonna use the rest of my life to lure some of them away. But then my kneecap snapped in half. Good times. And when I respawned into this cruel world, regrettably, I now only had 1 sleeping bag remaining. There was now 0 room for error. So I ran straight into the horde of hypothermiacs, grappled to the ceiling as 50 Prolovias launched themselves into the air, and I'm pretty sure they now have brain damage. But after plotting my next move while dangling 50 feet in the air, I threw a Kintro as bait, only to realize that I may have blocked my only way back out of this cave. Oh, I just threw him right in the tunnel. But on the bright side, the path was clear. So I continued on, had a close call with some polar bears, placed down my sleeping bag, drank some medicine, and after luring several subspecies of degenerate out of this cave with somewhat questionable methods, I observed the monkey bouncers leaving their post. Bro is swimming on the job, and took one last quick trip to the hypothermic Shadow Realm. At this point, I no longer had any sleeping bags left, and this was my last chance. It's also really cold, so I kinda needed to do this fast. So I used another expendable to clear the entrance, sprinted into the final cave, grappled right onto the ceiling, and watched as they became one with the fish. And just like that, the artifact of the strong has been secured. Fantastic. And I'd say that was pretty easy, considering it only took 20 deaths. But getting out was gonna be another issue, because it was super cold in here, my health was already low from falling off of a grapple, and I may have blocked the other cave entrance on the way in. So I ran down through the tunnel, grappled to the ceiling where I blocked myself in, and summoned 3 different Kintros in various positions. Long story short, I got very lucky through that first section, but my health was still running super low, and I was speed running my way out. What in tarnation? And even though I had made it past the hardest part, I wasn't out of the woods just yet. Or the ice, I guess. But after grappling across the entire tri-state area, I managed to lure all of these polar bears in the next area off of the ledge. And with my health ticking lower, it was now just a matter of getting back to my sleeping bag that was set up in the middle before my free trial of life expires. So I ran straight into the narrow walls of the cave with Mr. Monkey Man hot on my trail, grabbed my sleeping bag, grappled over the crystal just in time, and accepted my fate. Oh, that was so stressful. When I respawned, I said one last goodbye to my organic storage box, who was being kidnapped as we speak. But after grappling across the icy ravine, watching 2 polar bears struggle with the art of moving their legs, and of course witnessing a wall Prolovia almost RKO me from existence, I committed some more grapple-related crimes. Oh! And full sent it right into the entrance of the cave. At 4 FPS. Dude, I can't see! But just like that, after 5 days of pure agony, misery, depression, psychological and physical warfare, and some extreme hops, I finally secured the artifact. But at what cost? And when I made it back home, I took inventory of the 15 Kintros that I brought on this adventurous quest. I'm seeing right here that there were 0 left. That's exactly how I feel right now. But now with the other 3 artifacts secured, the only one remaining was the artifact of the immune, located in the bowels of Shrek's swamp. Now, the main problem with the swamp cave is that it produces toxic fumes that will disintegrate my lungs in 0.2 seconds. And the only way to combat that is to either wear a gas mask or a scuba suit. An entire scuba suit to be more precise, including the flippers for some reason. But to make the scuba pants, I needed 40 polymer. So I harvested some obsidian over on the mountain, and was able to craft some hard polymer, do a quick berry run, go for a prehistoric ride on Mr. Brontana's tail, grab some more materials to make some more sleeping bags, hired even more freeloaders for their very first job, made some high quality bug repellent, and on day 86, I set out for the swamp cave, and it was time to come up with a plan. First of all, I needed this bed and all of this hide and fiber because just like the snow cave, I'm probably gonna die like 50,000 times today. But the actual plan was a combination of rare flowers, bug repellent, my body, and the knowledge of the fact that I can reincarnate when I die, and they can't. Because if I can kite all the heathens over to one side of the cave, I can go to the other side of the cave and then just grab the artifact. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it would have been, but there was one small problem. Because when I headed in on Darth Chewbacca, the entrance was empty, and the scuba gear was keeping me safe from the toxic fumes. But inside that tunnel, there was already degenerates daring me to enter. So I pulled an Uno reverse card on that man, lured him out of the swamp cave, and this is where the problem lies. Because when we got to the entrance, the ARK AI was preventing him from leaving. That man was a prisoner of his own creation. And now that everything had to stay inside the cave, this cave might be worse than the snow cave. And you're about to see why. Because when I put all of my belongings right into McClucken's front pocket, I grabbed a single rare flower. And with that being the only thing on my body, it's okay if I die and respawn at one of the beds, as long as I lure things away as far as I can from the entrance. And I will try that plan as soon as I wake up from my nap, or not. This time I used multiple beds instead of sleeping bags, so I quite literally have unlimited respawns. And this time I avoided Mr. Snake, but in the next tunnel, there was a whole lot more degenerates waiting for me. So I tried again, and in the next attempt, I made it all the way to the back of the cave. But I forgot to eat the rare flower, so I didn't really kite anything, and I perished in about 0.2 seconds. But the third time's the charm. So on the third attempt, well, actually, we're not going to talk about the third attempt, but on the fourth attempt, I did kite things a little bit further back. And on the fifth attempt, I accidentally kited them back to where they were. But after the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, the ninth, oh, I actually made it. The 10th, the 11th, the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, sweet 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20, 21, 22, 23. 23 was actually a pretty good one, by the way. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Well, it was now the 30th attempt. And this time, I tried bringing a freeloader into the cave as a distraction, unsuccessfully. But on attempt number 31, I made it all the way to the back. And things were actually working out for the better. Come on, guys. Freeloader for lunch. Because now that everything was after the Kintro, I might be able to get the first cavern cleared out for the first time in over an hour. And I tried getting back to the same spot to check it out, but let's just say they were back.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
I'm not really sure how that even happened, but I had to try again. So I grabbed another rare flower, ran all the way through the tunnel of suffering, and I managed to get to the back of the cavern. And at this point, most of the spiders actually had left the tunnel entrance. So I grabbed yet another rare flower and my best Kintro this time, but due to my abysmally bad luck, the one time I bring the Kintro, the cave entrance is blocked again. Good times. At this point, I've been trying to do this cave for over 2 hours, and I was getting pretty annoyed. So I decided to just throw caution to the wind, and I ran as far as I could, and while I did still get pretty far in, I still got deleted like 15 more times. But after being smited out of existence by the 7 Nation Army once again, I decided to try my luck at enlisting 2 more services from the Kintro Army. I just had to make it to the back of the cave. And now that I got to the back of the cave and kited the things away, my plan was once again to run in with nothing, grab that other Kintro that was still in my bag, yeet that man into imminent danger, and while they were distracted on him, then I could respawn and go grab the other Kintros. And the plan actually worked, because I ran in, managed to grab my Kintro from my bag, and sentenced a Kintro to death row on my last second on this earth. And now the only part left was to get the rest of the Kintro army going. So I ran in yet again, and the pathways were pretty clear. And all according to the plan, I was able to throw out another Kintro right into the mosh pit before perishing from the toxic fumes. And while everything in there was fighting and distracted, I decided that I should probably place down some foundations inside the cave to prevent more things from respawning if they die. So I became a lumberjack, made some foundations, constructed them, and summoned my final 2 Kintros. And it took a while, but I was finally making some good progress inside this cave. And even though I wasn't sure if the Kintros could kill everything back there, the path in the entrance was finally cleared. So after visiting the gulag for the 93rd time, I realized that what I just said is actually true. I've died 93 times in this cave, but it was time to start moving up. So I started harvesting a little bit more stone because I wanted to fully block off that tunnel entrance. And to my surprise, that whole lake area was completely clear thanks to these 2 absolute madmen. and it was now time to move in. So I renamed the beds outside so I could tell which ones were which, grabbed everything that I needed, and now if I die, there's actual consequences, which is kind of scary. But I ran into the cave on Chewbacca Jr., witnessed a gang war with some dragonflies, and set up a bed on the stone foundations. Alright, we got a checkpoint. Inside the cavern with my Kentros, I harvested more chitin than I've ever seen in the past 88 days of playing this challenge. I was a proud employer that day. But now that I was here, I wasn't sure what to do next.
I don't know. I never thought I'd get this far.
Because in ARK Survival Evolve, you can normally just grapple up to the top of the ceiling and grab the artifact through that shortcut right there. But since we are playing the Ascended version of this game, that is no longer possible. Also, some leeches casually tried to suck my blood. But since I let them latch onto Chewbacca's elbow and then I removed them, it just kind of despawns them, so it's not even killing them. But anyways, with that shortcut no longer working, I had to go through this entire cave. So I drank some bug repellent, shoved one down Chewbacca's esophagus as well, and it was time to make the final push. The bug repellent was working really well, and literally nothing was attacking me. But when I had to cryo him and then throw him out again to get under this crouch spot, the effects wore off. Oh no! But I managed to get away, and I had to feed him another bug repellent, almost got consumed in the process, but the area was a whole lot more open than the starting area, and that made it really easy to loop all the way around to the final tunnel, where Chewbacca has eaten a few too many calories to fit inside. I had to do this one on foot. Okay, someone remind me why I need scuba flippers to breathe again, and was able to successfully grab the artifact of the immune. And now all that was left was to get out of here. Needless to say, I got a bit lost, but eventually I found my way out, with only 106 deaths to my name. Easy. And by the time I made it home, day 89 was already upon us, meaning I only have 11 days left to defeat Doug the fire-breathing false idol and try and take on the Overseer. So after an entire 2 days of humble veggie cake farming, I put all of my Kentros inside the battle bus and knocked on Doug's front door, aka the Red Obelisk. Each of my Kentros got a ration of 2 veggie cakes, and these should last them the rest of their life. And I may or may not have forgot 2 Kentros along the way. But a few minutes later, it was now time to face Doug. I had no idea if this was gonna work, and to be honest, this is my least favorite boss fight on this map because the fire breath does a percentage of damage and the Kentros don't reflect it. Also, Doug, being the menace that he is, has twice the health of Papapithecus with 432,000. And we barely made it out of that fight alive. But with the Kentros each having 50k health and Chewbacca's Darth Vader mask as an intimidation tactic, I think we just might pull this off. Wait, 400k health? We have been hoodwinked. Doug? Why are you not deep frying me? Are you good, buddy? We're already halfway dead. Run! Alright, gentlemen, stand still, just like we practiced. Wait, no, why are you all attacking me? This is so unfair! Okay, so clearly that was impossible. When I got decapitated by the Dimorph Battalion, Mr. Doug was still at 390k health, and the Kentro reflection ability was not working on the fire damage, of course. So the only way that this could even ever be possible is if I had like 200 veggie cakes per Kentro and I perfectly distracted him when he did the fire breath. And hearing me say all this, I'm sure you guys are probably expecting me to fail this challenge. Well, I kind of already did. But I still wasn't gonna give up just yet, because after doing some time travel and reloading my save once again, I attended my local Bible study. And after reading the entire Bible front to back, I realized that while it was possible to do most things in this challenge without killing, not all killing is considered murder in terms of the commandments. To keep things simple, if somebody kills somebody for no reason, that is murder. But if I happened to kill a dragon man named Doug because he breathed fire on me and tried to burn me alive, that would be considered self-defense. And I could have been killing carnivores this entire challenge, but that would have been too easy. That's why I didn't. So even though I failed the initial challenge that I made up myself, I still want to see how far we can get with the technical definition of murder. And I now had a few goals. First of all, I needed a better hybrid between Apple and Android. And while he was busy becoming a man, the next step was to tame a good Yudi and a high damage individual. So I crafted some NyQuil lace trank arrows, finally got a female Dinopithecus with the good stats, and then this happened. Okay, dude, are we serious right now? My house is basically just a free hotel at this point. But anyways, I didn't have much time to waste. So I flew over to the north, riveting gameplay right here, and I found some not so good Yudis, because the highest level was 100, but he did have 19 points into stamina, which is, I mean, it's one of the stats of all time, but he was the best I was gonna get. So I flew over, one of his goons tried to ambush me, and I didn't like that. But then I remembered what I'd learned in Bible study last Sunday, and since this degenerate was trying to remove my legs, it was a perfectly moral thing to do to execute him on the spot. Get wrecked. And now that the Carno can no longer get away with being a heathen, I set up my trap, and after 5 minutes of straight nonsense, bro, can you please just get in the trap? This man did everything but enter my trap, including attempted murder. And since he was trying to kill me, it was pretty good justification to shoot him in the face with a few bedtime stories, but the man was pretty special, to put it mildly. What are you even doing? It's got 360 feared. This man was clearly allergic to stone doorway traps. So I resorted to the good old-fashioned trank and run method, but that wasn't really working either. Luckily, there was this abandoned house 5 foot away from my trap, and that worked okay for about 10 seconds, but it didn't last very long. Okay, that's just unfair. But after another 10 minutes of nonsense, I decided to stop being lazy, place down 2 more stone ramps, and after some mind-numbing and totally fair gameplay, I finally trapped the Yudi on day 93. And now I had another problem. This gentleman was very close to entering the afterlife. And after getting jump scared for the 50th time, I went to the prehistoric grocery store and tried to heal him up, but when I dropped off his lunch for the day, well, he didn't receive it.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
When pigs can fly, I guess. So I just kept shooting trank arrows into his eyebrow, spacing them out to make sure that I was getting maximum NyQuil while he healed up a little bit in between. And after a few more very slowly spaced shots, the Yudi fell asleep with 111 health left. And after feeding him some daily rations and busting it down on his bedside, the Yudi was finally tamed. And I gave him the glorious name of Ed, because he was very special. And once I was back home, I was out of metal for the 30th time this video. So I farmed that, and I shifted my focus to the star of the show, the dinopithecus. I wanted my damage dealer to be something I've never tamed before, and I heard these guys were pretty good. So I tracked down an Ovis, and I wasn't able to save his life, but I was able to collect his inheritance. Thanks, heathens. And I found a level 145 dinopithecus on the dino tracker. He only had 19 points into health, which is standard luck for me, but he did have 30 points into melee, which is pretty insane. So after removing this Sarco from his life after he tried to assault me, it was time for the tame. This tame is pretty interesting, because what you want to do is stand around and wait for the brother to unhinge his jaw. And once he obliges, you sneak over and shove some mutton inside. And then you run. Very fast, because he would prefer if you put yourself inside his jaw. But anyways, I just had to repeat this process 14 more times. And it took a while because we were in the middle of the swamp and everything wanted to kill me and he also wanted to kill everything. But after kiting him over to the land and then shoving 14 pieces of deceased Ovis down his trachea, I was now the proud owner of an obese alligator. And yes, that took 50 minutes. I don't want to talk about it. But anyways, on day 96, I repeated the process on this level 130 male. And now all that was left to fight Doug was to make some more veggie cakes, which took the entire day 97 of me standing next to a cooking pot, and level up and heal everyone up with some potions, which once again took another day and a half. But as day 99 was coming to a close, I had everything ready to head back over to Doug's hometown, and the only thing left to do was to enter Doug's house, and then defend myself when he assaults me. Oh no! It was so close. In the end, everything turned to dust. How biblical. I even tried this fight a few more times, but the RNG always ended the same. Kentros just aren't very good against the dragon, but we did get really close, and with one more Dinosuchus or Dinotherium, I think we would have had it. Anyways, all the commandments have been fulfilled, and we did take down Dinopithecus. And there was a couple that weren't mentioned, like honoring your mother and father, which Chewbacca did honor me, and not to take the Lord's name in vain, which I did not do. And the main takeaway from this video is that I do not like Doug. If you guys enjoy vanilla type of challenges, please like the video to let me know and comment what you want to see next. Hardcore Lost Colony is coming very soon, and so is another very difficult vanilla challenge. It's the most difficult ever attempted on YouTube, I'll just say that. So make sure you're subscribed if you want to see all that, and if you want to see me tame every kaiju in ARK Ascended's new kaiju mod, click right here.